I've got the Chief Executive helping me, and I've got my learner licence. Tuia ki runa, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho, tuia te hari tangata, karonga I te pō, karonga te ao. Homie, hui, taiki. Well, welcome to our first business meeting of the Nelson City Council in this trillennium. I've just got a few opening comments. Firstly, I would like to thank the Chief Executive, Pat, and his staff for the way in which they have been of huge help to me as I've got to grips with the Office of Mayor, and I know councillors would also want to acknowledge the work of staff and help in that regard. I'd particularly like to thank Nan Ward, who's been a particular assistance in the Mayor's office in the transition, and she'll be assisting me through to December. You never quite know when you stand for public office of this sort how it will go. If there's something that has surprised me in the weeks since the election is how much I am enjoying getting to know both the councillors and also the staff, and actually enjoying it a lot more than I thought. There's a fair amount of nervousness, but can I thank everybody for that? And can I really thank the councillors for the way in which you're picking up with the reins of the organisation. Today does mark a unique piece of administrative history. After 148 years, the Nelson City Council today moves to a paperless council meeting. There's a saving for the ratepayer of about $50,000 a year. Can I say all of us finding our way with LG Hub? You cannot be an effective elected representative without information, and no councillor during the course of this meeting, as we get used to that new system, should have any shyness about saying they need a bit of help with their IT to ensure that they've got the proper papers to assist with a good decision. I've also got from the IT team a chocolate fish for Councillor Campbell, because when someone fraudulently was purporting to be the Mayor, demanding that you all send me money and do other things, Councillor Campbell followed the rules perfectly from the IT training and got in touch with IT, including at the weekend, to shut it down. So congratulations to Councillor Campbell for being on top of that. The last thing I would note, and my view is that it is an increasing risk for all organisations in the IT age, is that what took place there is a risk for both us as councillors and as an organisation. And we do need to be quite vigilant in protecting both each other and this institution from hacks in that space. We move now on to the formal agenda, of which the first item is apologies, and I don't think there are any. Secondly, there's the confirmation of business. The audit information has not come through with respect to the annual report for the Nelson City Council for 21-22. And so I'm going to defer item 13 until that is completed. The next item on the agenda, do I need a motion to confirm the business? No. The next item on the agenda is the declaration of interests. I would note that because most of us have not yet completed the formal process around it, we need to be extra cautious in that area. And if there is any item on today's agenda of which members would like to declare an interest, now is the appropriate time.
Yes, I would. We're discussing the library today, I believe, and my sister works part-time at the library, if that's a conflict of interest.
How very Nelson. All right, we then, we will be having a public forum at the December meeting. There is not one today. I also want to draw councillors' attention to the format today, and that it is my intention to take a break as close as is practical round items of business on the hour, So there'll be a break for 5 minutes at 10 o'clock. There will be a break for morning tea at 11 o'clock. And again, just a 5 minute at 12 and 1. And then half an hour for lunch in a similar format for the afternoon. The next item of business is the minutes from our inaugural meeting. Is there a councillor prepared to move the adoption of the minutes from that meeting?
Yes, Mayor.
Moved by councillor Courtney,
Yes,
seconded
Mayor.
by councillor Skinner. Is there any discussion on those minutes? I'll put those to the vote. Those in favour of those being adopted, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no, and that is carried. Item 6 on the agenda is the pleasurable job of the statutory declaration for councillor Sanson, who with good reason was not able to make the inaugural meeting. I would now invite councillor-elect, I've got to call you, councillor-elect Sanson to the table to sign her declaration and to present her with her pin.
Yeah. Yeah. Standing up or sitting down? Yeah, okay. Hi. I, Rachel Sanson, declare that I will faithfully and impartially and according to the best of my skill and judgment execute and perform in the best interest of Nelson City the powers, authorities and duties vested in or imposed upon me as an elected member of the Nelson City Council by virtue of the Local Government Act 2002, the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 or any other act. Ko Rachel Lisa Sanson, ka whakapuaki ka mahi pono, tō tika hoki aho, i ngā mea e mātou e taia ana e au, hei painga mō te rohi o whakatū i runanga i te mana ko riro mai e au hei mema o te kaunihera o whakatū e raro anō i te turi kāwanatanga a rohi o te tau rua mano mārua te turi pārongo huinga a kawa a kāwanatanga o te tau kotahi mano i waro waru te ko mā whetu e raru rānei te tahi a tūturei.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
As we sign.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, do I take it?
I think you will take some guidance.
Do I take it? Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
We now come to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Mayor's report. My report at this meeting is divided up into 3 sections to enable us to be able to debate each. My intention is with each of these items, and I seek guidance both from Chief Executive Pat and others, was to have a pretty open dialogue and questions. And then when we feel we've got all the information about the items, to then move to the formal debate on each of the resolutions that are being considered. I think with respect to item 7, it would be helpful for the discussion for the issues over the library to be discussed as one part, and then for the resolution and discussion on the issues related to the floods and storms to be taken as a second part. So the first substantive item in the Mayor's report is with respect to the library. And the substantive resolution is consistent with the position that I took as a mayoral candidate during the local elections, and that is that the $46 million library proposal is unaffordable for our community in the current economic environment. It is my view that we are in probably the most challenging economic times for more than a decade, and that the combination of pressure on both households and businesses, particularly the very high inflation rate, is such that it puts households under pressure. Underlying it is also a view that with high construction inflation, the cost of the library project is likely to become greater than the 46 million. And of course, the cost of servicing the debt associated with it is also increasing. Now, it is my view that the provision of libraries is one of the important services that councils provide. And we have other issues with the library. It is my view that we should be getting on as quickly as possible with the expenditure to address the seismic issues that have been identified with the library. It is my view that regardless of whether you are going down the road of a replacement library or not, you'd want to get on and do that. But we need to be open that the latest estimates for that work is likely to be of the order of about 2.2 million was the latest sort of estimates. I'm hopeful that with the work of the Library Task Force, we might get it down less than that. But that then poses a question that if you were going to spend that order of magnitude of money, then to get good value for money for the ratepayer, you actually need to ensure that the library is used for the repaired library is used for a substantive period. Now, I recognise that there will be a bigger discussion for our council to have, and it's my intention to have a substantive workshop before Christmas around the really big ticket items, big projects, and what priorities this council would wish to have. I might have a view that makes our chief executive a little nervous, and that is that while statutorily we're required to have a 10-year plan, the reality around those big projects is that it's most important for the council to have priority about what you want to achieve in the next 3 years, because it is inevitable with each triennial cycle that those priorities get juggled around. So in those discussions, the most important discussion is what is the things that this council wants to achieve for this community over the 3-year term going forward. Now, it is also my view that the impact of the August flood and storm event has further tilted the scales in favour of not proceeding with the library. My view is that the single greatest duty that this council has over the next couple of years is going to be getting that large program of repairs done and us having the capacity to be able to finance that. There's a duty both on this council and on our staff to maximise the degree to which we offset that with claims from insurance and through the government. But I think we need to be open with ourselves that there still is going to be tens of millions of dollars of that that falls back on the ratepayer. The last point I'd say is that it's really easy, whether you are in central or local government, as an elected representative, to be on the side of wanting to keep costs under control for ratepayers. The hard part is actually deciding which are the things that you're not going to do rather than those things that you are going to do. And in my view, the resolution that I have proposed is about that realism that communities have to make choice about what they do when. So in terms of process, my view is the prudent thing for the council to do is to give a clear direction to council staff that we do not want any further expenditure being spent on the Halifax project. And secondly, that we then need to have a process that I want to give as much pace as Chief Executive and council staff can cope, and that is with respect to getting the current library reopened. And then you need to have that longer term strategic discussion around what is the long-term right sort of library for our community. My view, it is something substantially more modest than the $46 million proposal. How does that stack up with the other major capital projects? And that's a conversation for us to have as we do the annual plan and review of the long-term plan. So that is the perspective that I'm coming from in my Mayor's report, and would, I think in the first instance, allow questions from councillors so that some crystallisation can be had. And then I assure you after that, there'll be an opportunity for a good debate because it is a significant item on our agenda. So firstly, any questions from councillors that are welcome to be made either of council staff, the Chief Executive or myself. Councillor Stella.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. So part of this recommendation is that the library is removed, or the project is removed from the long-term plan. So I'd just like to explore the implications of that. Does that mean there won't be any prospect of any movement in this area for the next 10 years, for example?
No, I think we should, can I firstly clarify the wording because it's deliberate? And that is that changes be drafted and prepared for consideration. So I'm not proposing a decision today that it be returned, a bit removed from the long-term plan. It's asking our officials to prepare the work for that to allow. Now, I have had some informal discussion with Councillor Rohan and others who are view, well, look, I can see the argument for not proceeding to continue to spend money, but I want to leave a bit more wriggle room. I don't know whether Councillor Rohan, you wanted to share the alternative wording at this point in the discussion?
I think let the discussion play out a little longer.
Okay. So one of the alternatives with that wording does not, in response to your question, lock it in. It asks for it to be prepared for consideration. Councillor Sanson.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I'm just wondering whether it would be an option to break up recommendation 2 so that the second part of it is its own bullet point, standalone.
That's a possibility. Can I indicate from the chair on this issue? I'd like to hear a range of views. Then for us to work whether we could get a resolution of which all councillors could be comfortable. If that is unsuccessful, I'm open-minded about splitting the resolution in the event that if there are members that wish to have a different point of view clearly enunciated in the vote.
Okay.
It is my preference as we work through issues to actually have a pretty free-flowing discussion and where possible to avoid divisions. Certainly councillors should use this as an opportunity during the course of the debate to present a point of view. So you don't always have to present a point of view in the way in which you vote. You can say, well, I'm supporting the resolution, but you need to know, I think library services are really important. And when we get to the annual plan process, this is what I'll be pushing for. That is perfectly proper to get on the public record in a council meeting such as this, and would be the format I'd favour.
So a follow-up question, if that's possible.
Sure.
I'm just wondering whether it would be an option to actually have a discussion, like an all elected members kind of discussion or strategic planning session before we kind of signal this kind of, the intention to remove it from the long-term plan. It feels a little preemptive to me just because we haven't had that discussion as a team. So I'm just wondering.
I don't favour that approach, and let me tell you for 2 reasons. Firstly, if we're proposing to spend about $2 million on the current library, you need to know whether this proposal is continuing. And you need to know, and I tell you the other people that I met with quite deliberately last Friday was Wakatoan Corporation are the substantive landowners, and I want to be fair to them and provide them with some certainty as a significant property investor in the town as to there is. Now, if there are councillors around this table that wish the current library proposal to be continued to work from, you should argue that position. Councillor Sanson.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry, just to clarify, I'm comfortable with the first part of the recommendation. It's more just around I wonder if there might be a risk that we are directing staff to do work around the removal of the project from the long-term plan, which if as a group of elected members we don't have alignment on, could then result in unnecessary work. And I just wonder if it might be a better option or an option to have that discussion first as elected members, and then we can direct staff as appropriate.
Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Just a clarification, by accepting this recommendation as it is, are we signalling that the building is fit for purpose?
We are signalling that we think the current library can have its seismic issues addressed. The term fit for purpose is, in my view, is the building civic house fit for purpose? I think it is. Do I think it's a bit old? Do I think we need to set a task force up to look for its future? Yes, I do.
Okay.
But the main thing we are signalling is that project, and in my view, this is about also the integrity of the electoral process. Every one of you as councillors were asked your view during the election, and I'm an old-fashioned Democrat, and that is I'm going to be saying the same things after the election that I said before the election. And one of the reasons this resolution has come to the council table is a majority of the councillors around the table had expressed during the election a position that they did not support the current library proposal. Councillor Raney.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm interested to know what proportion of the, as you call it, the Halifax project relates to engagement with the community in regards to the needs for a modern library/community hub. Because indeed, I think that's an incredibly important part of the project that may be overlooked. It's not just about the site, it's about the needs for the community in regards to a new facility, a new civic facility for the city. Now, I don't want to dip into debate, but it may well be that a refurbished, not a reopened Elmer Turner provides a sizable portion of the needs for the community. It's quite clear that it wasn't providing all the needs of the community. Otherwise, why would we have been considering a new community hub? So I'm concerned with the wording of this, that all expenditure on consideration of a library or community hub facility for the city is going to be stopped, when in fact, I think that conversation with the community, with those who are engaged in that conversation, the aspirations of our community and the expectations, especially of our younger people going forward in the community, be met. So that's a bit of a long-winded way of saying, is there going to be any budget left to look at the concept of a new community hub for Nelson, or is that post the discussion that we're going to have later in the year? My view of the right order of things is firstly to say, we're not spending any more money on that project. We think it is unaffordable. Step number 2 is we're going to set up a task force in the next paper, and that is going to be totally focused on getting the facility reopened. And I would like maximum effort of both councillors and staff going into that. Step number 3, in parallel with that big strategic discussion of relative large capital projects, is that we then say, well, what is the needs of library versus swimming pool, sports facility, other major projects that we would want to get in the program. And that, in my view, seems a logical process of work. The thing I want to reassure you of, Councillor Raney, if this resolution is passed and we get to a discussion in March and there's a majority of this council that wants to invest
and I just pick a number out of thin air, 25 million in a redeveloped library facility in the long-term plan, is your chair going to be saying, no, we can't consider that because we passed this resolution? Absolutely not. That is the discussion at that time. What we are saying is the concept and the plan that has a budget of the order of 46 million around that site is not going to have any further work done on until that strategic discussion has been held.
Thank you.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. This is difficult, this particular issue, because a lot of time, money and thought has gone into this. Expectations have been raised, no question about that. And I'm just wondering whether we're being a little preemptive in moving on this at this time, because I want to say that there's a very important annual plan coming up for consideration, hopefully tomorrow, or the next day or over the weekend, because there's a high degree of urgency about that. And we're going to, following on from that, have the most significant long-term plan for a generation the following year in 2024. The most significant long-term plan for a generation. And I just wonder, you know, the first item on the first full council meeting of this triennium, we're going headfirst into this. I want to retain hope. We all want, not, I was told never to use the word I, we all want to retain hope and optimism and build for the future. I wouldn't mind having it modified, that recommendation there, to sort of say that we leave it for consideration for 2024, the review of the long-term plan. That's my contribution.
Can I just clarify, Councillor Courtney, there are two parts of the resolution, the further expenditure, and then there is the changes be drafted. You're indicating opposition to both?
I'm saying we pause.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. Other contributions? Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. Just another question of clarification following from the comment by Councillor Brand, that we're indicating we believe the current library building is fit for purpose. I understand there's some kind of seismic assessment being undertaken. Do we have the results of that review?
Correct. There's firstly the seismic assessment, and I'm more than happy if you want to direct the staff or the staff to indicate if my answer is anything other than fulsome. There's a seismic assessment done of the tiles. The council staff have been working vigorously to try and provide an urgent solution to that. And secondly, the council in its last days got a detailed seismic assessment. That report, as I understand it, has not yet been finalised, but will be ready for the reopening task force next week, Councillor Stella. I have seen the draft of that report, the detailed seismic assessment, having written the law around earthquake-prone buildings. There is nothing in that report, the detailed seismic assessment draft that's been prepared by Becca, that raises any concerns with me that we're not able to make that building safe. Yes, there's expenditure, but we can make it safe at reasonable cost. I just condition that is the draft report. There was some finalisation of that report to be concluded and to be ready for the library reopening task force. Councillor Coe.
Mr. Mayor. My concerns at this stage is that if we're such a relatively new council, the number of members who are here, one of whom I'm, that there are some of us that aren't as intimately knowledgeable about this project itself. And this decision, it seems to me, is important, especially considering the implications of the expenditure for our flood recovery. But I also think that to dispatch it this early on as such a huge civic investment and a taonga for our region and not having been involved in the previous conversations, I'm not super comfortable with pretty much putting it in bin. So I think that I'm not sure where to go. I'm happy to take some leads if anyone else has got any other opinions. But I understand that we may need to take a bit of a breath and pause some spending. But yeah, I do believe that this is an important project for our city. This or something similar. So got it up.
Any further? Councillor Bench.
Mayor Nick, I need one of those yellow plates. So forgive me. I didn't electioneer on the issue of the library, but I'll have to say that everybody that spoke to me about the library didn't want it. Personally, it concerns me that we should spend council money on areas that could be affected by global warming. And that's really my issue with the library. I don't want our turn to be looked back on and said, why did those fellas spend the money there? Because you can argue about what's causing global warming, but I personally don't believe you can argue as whether it's happening or not. Whatever is happening is happening. And I have real issues with spending council's money on places where I think we should know better. I don't see this as drawing a line under it. I actually see it as giving us another shot at it and time to discuss it and go over it again. And maybe because I haven't got one of these yellow signs, I don't understand the wording properly, but to me it's saying we do get another crack at it. I quite like the idea that Councillor Courtney put up and the reasons why that the wording could be that we pause it for those reasons. I quite like that idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bench. Look, I think we've sort of metamorphosed with the learner chair from questions into debate and intend to proceed pretty informally on that basis. I apologise if I haven't been as clear about that as I could have been. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. My view at present is that this is an issue of prioritisation and that at this time further expenditure is not in the best interest of our community, but that we should be reviewing this in the process of formulating our next long-term plan. My question is regarding section 3.10 in your report, and it says that you propose that a review of the library redevelopment project be undertaken. And it's just a question. I was told that there's no dumb questions, so I apologise if this is obvious, but just around what that review would look like and whether there is cost to that or whether the review was in the process of our discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. Did I see Campbell Rollo having a view?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor Nick. Look, I think a bit like Councillor Bench next to me, an L plate would go fantastic right now. I think elections bring the best and the worst out of all of us. And I feel as a new person, this is something we're diving straight into, and it's a big project that staff have put a huge amount of hours into already. I feel uncomfortable supporting this until we have some further clarity on what is actually going to happen with the library. And if we're getting a report back that says actually maybe we can't open the library that's there, I would suggest that we keep on looking into this project, but I would like to be not supporting something until I've seen the report of the current library.
Councillor Skinner.
Yes, we seem to be moving a little bit of debate. Yes, I don't have too many questions on it, but I think the intent there is that we are without ourselves, no fault of our own, juggling two balls here. We've got the issue with the tiles and getting the library opened as soon as possible, which I know that is the intent of us all and intent or desire of the community. And obviously that ties into what we should or shouldn't be doing with the current library, whether further investing in a new building and location. So I'm just indicating I think it's a good signal for us to make that we're putting a pause on this and to reassess for the long-term plan. And the wording in there is in regards to getting the staff to prepare a consideration isn't confirming a direction, but it gives us some breathing space for the task force to look at the condition of a library and what can be done to open it straight away. And I think while we've got over our heads in the long-term plan to rebuild the library or negotiate the exact location, it makes it a little bit difficult for us to determine the best direction for reopening it as quickly as possible. And I think that is a priority. Well, it is a priority for us to reprioritise some of the decisions made last term in regards to opening this library ASAP, and with the flood damage that is upon us also to prioritise that recovery. Thank you.
Councillor.
Good, Mr. Mayor. I've just been informed that I thought the discussion at the beginning was that those who hadn't filled out their declaration forms could then provide a disclaimer for their conflicts of interest, possibly. So my conflict of interest is with Wakatu. I was formerly employed by them, wasn't directly involved in the project with the library, and I'm still continuing to be employed by them for projects that are actually outside of the catchment of Nelson City Council in Blenheim and also in Motueka. So
can I just check in terms of how we should deal with this? My view is that we should note that Councillor Pakipaki declared an interest that he is continuing to do work for the Wakatu Incorporation, but none of that work involves anything to do with the library project. Is that correct?
Two other things. He's working on a contract basis and he has no pecuniary interest, no pecuniary benefit from this discussion, and is capable of approaching this with an open mind.
Mr. Mayor, I would also like to declare that I'm not a shareholder of Wakatu. So that's sure.
I think it's important that these issues of conflict of interest, and it is early days, just be clearly on the table. So I appreciate Councillor Pakipaki putting that on the record. And can I just suggest, before the minutes of this meeting are finalised, that we check them past Councillor Pakipaki and make sure that it records those things accurately. Other contributions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Primarily just some questions for our GMs, I think. We might even get 4 out of 5 done. Nikki McDonald, I'm guessing you'll be the person to answer this. Is there any implications regarding our significance and engagement policy as a result of stopping spending on this project?
Through the chair, no, I don't think so, because we're saying it's pending further direction and it's appropriate for a council to take the time it needs to formulate a decision.
And then just in terms of the removal of it from the LTP, that would have to form a LTP amendment?
Yes, through the chair, that's a decision for council, but that would be my recommendation, that it would be of a degree of materiality that you would wish to do that.
And just with LTP amendments, what's the engagement requirements for those?
So it requires a special consultative procedure and an audit of the changes to the LTP. So doing it in concert with an annual plan or an LTP is the most efficient way to manage that.
So just for my own clarity, my expectation is that in that busy program, we will be preparing both the annual plan, and the annual plan will have implication changes to the long-term plan, and there will be a special consultative process on the front end of 2023 to put all this together. And the bit that does concern me is that this is a tight timetable. The amount of time frame for us to be able to have the discussion and get those things together for that consultative process to feed into the rates process for 2023, it is tight, and that is why the sooner we can provide clarity to council staff about what goes in there, the more effectively we're going to be able to manage that process. Yeah, further questions from the Deputy Mayor?
Yes, probably for Andrew, just building off of Councillor James's question earlier, just with the review being referenced, and maybe it's for you, Mayor Nick, do we have timeline, scope, budget for that? And yeah, what is the intention there of sort of the scale of that review? As a governance or operational, where does that sit?
If you ask me, my thinking as mayor is that the issues of the urgent repair for the library are going to need to be dealt with outside of the annual plan process. That is, we're going to get that task force up and running. They're going to, it may even be possible, and I give councillors a heads up, if the council staff are able to get the estimates and the work that's required for getting the current library back fully operational, if they can get that work done quickly, I'm open to having a early council meeting prior to the mid-December meeting, so that we're not acting in the governance end, because I do think there's a genuine motivation in my discussions with councillors to get on and get that bit of done work done. And that's actually our power of work, and that's why I want all the staff effort pumped into getting the current library safe and reopened fully. And then it's my view that the longer term picture about what happens in the medium to long term is going to be quite a substantial discussion. I do not think that by February next year, we will be clear in our mind, clear enough to be able to put into the long-term plan the alternative. That, in my view, at some time in the next decade or two, there will be a requirement to replace the Elmer Turnmill Library. So that if you ask me, Deputy Mayor, what's my time frame of how these things come in order, that would be, in my view, the order of progression. Councillor Pakipaki.
Mr. Mayor, just on that time frame, that's quite poignant. Is there an expectation, if we're looking at spending $2.2 million on the refit of the existing library, is there expectation of the community, or has there been discussions about the, maybe Pat can answer it, about the expectations of the duration for us to get the best money out of that reinvestment in our capital there? And if so, would that expectation, if it's 5 years, we need to get use out of the library, or 10 years, is that does that coincide with the delivery of potentially a new library beyond that?
That is a good discussion and the right questions to ask at the time when we have the work done and that urgent work by Christmas. That work does not require us to change the long-term plan, because, as I understand, providing it's of the order of the $2 million figure, it is not something that triggers the significance test and for that to go into the long-term plan. And that is why I'm wanting to pull out all stops on getting that work done. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, Minik. Listening around the table, I feel like there is some level of alignment, but I guess I'm also hearing that there's quite a lot of concern from elected members about kind of shutting the doors on the prospect of a new library for the community in the next decade. So I just wonder whether the second sentence on the recommendation part 2 is kind of the sticking point for quite a few people, and whether, you know, would it still have the same effect if we just remove that? You know, it still sends a clear signal to the organisation that we want to pause expenditure. So that would be no more staff time on the current project. But then it gives us time to work through as a cohort what the priorities are, and the amendment to the long-term plan could happen as part of the annual plan process, but without kind of getting staff to do work that is maybe preemptive.
Yeah,
feel like
can I suggest an alternative wording on the second part?
Yeah.
And see whether we can get some clarity there. How would it read it? It said that consideration of the removal of the project from the long-term plan and consideration of any alternative project will occur through the 23-24 annual plan process. The bit that I want to be relatively clear about, and this is a test for councillors, because my view is good governance is about giving our staff good direction. And what I'm wanting to do is give clear direction that the current $46 million library proposal on the Halifax Street is not going to progress, but that we have an open mind about the timing of a more modest project to redevelop with the sort of questions that Councillor Brand has raised around the longer term plans of the library. So I would prefer today that we did not say, oh, we maybe might be on proceeding with Wakatoa Incorporation and the Maitai project. I don't think the maybe might be helpful. The maybe might be on, hey, yeah, but there's an open discussion to have about a lesser substantive library project. And so I test that wording with the council, notes, and it's a note, that consideration of the removal of the project from the long-term plan and consideration of any alternative project will occur through the 2023-24 annual plan process.
It's just.
I think I had a Councillor Bench.
Mayor Nick, it's my understanding that the library is too small. Is that correct? So basically, a new library is needed somewhere, sometime.
I would condition that, Councillor Bench. My children think our house is way too small. I think it's perfectly adequate. Everybody will have a different view about what is the right size facility. And I think the really big discussion that is part of the question over the library is that the nature of libraries is dramatically changing. And that is the question. Do I think current Almatunda Library is the right library for the next generation of Nelson? Personally, no, I don't. Then the question is, what's the amount of life that you want to get out of your facilities, whether it be Civic House, others, and how long do you stretch them? And then when do you start making that generational change in the facilities that you upgrade? And it's about the timing and the relative capital pressures on those. Councillor Rainey. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, through the chair. As people are sort of, I'm not sure if we're in debate or if we're just having a conversation, not having debate, but I do have a number of points I'd like to discuss which would deem to be debate. So is now the time or not?
Yes, now's the time.
Okay. One, I feel it would be reminiscent to remove this project from the long-term plan. I feel that councils have not provided the level of investment into its civic assets, and I feel the library is a key central point to a community to thrive and grow as a region. I put it into context. Picton has built a new library between 15 to 18 million. Picton is a far smaller size than Nelson region, and I just feel that people need to put into context what the cost of a library is. There are a number of councils around New Zealand that are currently redeveloping their libraries because their communities have outgrown the need of a library from the 1970s. And being a child from the 1970s, I appreciated the library and was there quite often. However, the library of the 21st century is not that of the 1970s, and investment is needed. I also appreciate it's easier when there's been a disaster and we take into account the extreme weather event that we would need to reprioritise our long-term plan and where our money is spent. And it is easy to put on the accountant hat and start counting the beans and withdraw the largest projects. I also feel that there are a number of smaller projects that would soon add up and equivalent and be more than the library project, where there are double ups and can be reviewed in the long-term plan, and feel that when the long-term plan is reviewed, that those two should be taken into account. And while the library the figure of 44 million without inflation or any other adjustments is a hard pill to swallow. But when you have a building that was an old car yard place, and that there is health and safety issues, not just the ceiling tiles or seismic responsibility, but there is a health and safety issue for the staff who are working there, as well as leaks in the roof that are damaging and putting at risk valuable resources that our community would like to have access to. I feel that it would be remiss to remove it completely and no investment done, full stop. So therefore, while I agree that 44 million is not the priority when we're looking at the flood, I feel that there needs to be a balance between the recovery from the recent weather events and getting people back into a state of their lives where they feel safe, secure, and able to live freely in the region they choose. I also feel it needs to be a balance between the projects that need to continue so that we have a city that is recovering but also thriving.
Thank you. Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the thing for me is that we need to learn from our past, and I would just like to very briefly be a bit of a scratched record to discuss for a second the Performing Arts Centre, because indeed that was a project that consumed this council for a period of time, absolutely consumed it. And indeed, I think that the amount of money that was spent on the potential development of that project was in excess of $1 million. Just to look at it. The need was clear. The community really had put a lot of effort into wanting to look at that kind of project. Council of the day decided not to go ahead. It's never come back. It's never come back to this council table, a project. Yet the community need has never gone away. My real concern, and I completely echo what Councillor Brand has to say, is that for whatever reason, if we turn away from looking at a new facility for the city, there is the potential, and this city's got a bit of a bad reputation for it, of saying, well, we fixed up the old library, that'll be right, and it ends up being our library again for another 20 years or whatever. Now, we may sort of, no disrespect, okay, we may laugh about that, but it actually, there's a real chance that that could happen. So it's tremendously important from my perspective, and I am going to support this because I think there is enough things in there for us to give consideration to, and I appreciate the new number 3 that you put up there, Mayor Nick. I think it's right. I doubt whether 4 is actually needed at all, because I would think that everything that we're going to be doing in the annual plan is going to have to come up for reconsideration due to the impacts of the flood and weather event. We're going to have to be looking at every line in the budget. Just want to say one more thing.
Just as a process question, I'm going to have a separate debate on recommendation 4.
Yeah.
Because I want to give officials, and particularly the manager of infrastructure. So from a process point of view, the 2 items that we're currently debating is the Mayor's report and the original resolution 2 and 3. I'm going to have a separate discussion on item 4, as I indicated.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So if I could just finish off, the concept of $46 million was, there's plenty of commentary about how the community didn't want that. Of course, the $46 million is not a cost that the community would bear right now. It's a cost that successive generations of this community would bear over a period of time as we service that debt. Indeed, we're still servicing the debt on plenty of community projects, but they never get discussed. Millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of community projects that we're still servicing the debt on. So it's a little bit dangerous to immediately assume that the $46 million is the only reason for not looking at this, because indeed, even though it may seem like a lot of money, actually it's spread over a period of time. And I would hate to think that if we go down the path of revisioning this project, which I certainly hope we do, beware, because a more modest project in scale may well come out being exactly that amount of money, if not more. So that remains to be seen.
If there is a lesson, in my view, for the city from the experience of the debate about the theatre, is that the governing body of this council needs to be clear about what it thinks it wants to do, to be very focused on getting those things done, and being very clear about where we have community support and where we do not. And the challenge I would give in debating this clause around the council table is for those councillors that want to proceed with the current project, right? That is the substance part. The substantive part of this is saying, no, we're not going to proceed with that set of project. And I am keen, because this is the right time to debate. There's been about an investment of about $800,000 of ratepayers' money into it. There has been substantive concern from a number of reasons about that project. And at this first council meeting, this is the opportunity to say, we want to keep working on that project, or no, we don't. And I made my position very clear that I don't think we should. I don't think there is community support to do so, but I totally accept the strong points that have been made by councillors, and that is, but hey, that does not discount the proper argument to have about the sort of modern library facility this town needs. Councillor Skinner.
Through the Mayor, we seem to be in a range of debate when nothing has moved. I'd like just get the ball rolling, at least just move at the receiver report. I'm not talking about the library, but just conscious that we're debating.
I'm a little bit less clear on procedures. Can I ask Councillor Skinner, are you prepared to move resolutions 1, 2 and 3?
Happy to move 1, 2 and 3.
So I'll move, and I will second from the chair the resolutions on the screen 1, 2 and 3. And we're now into formal debating those. And it is my intention to try and bring this, while giving councillors a good opportunity to discuss it and potentially to further modify the wording if needed. I'm keen to ensure that we resolve this issue prior to our first break. Are councillors broadly comfortable with resolutions 1, 2 and amended resolutions 3? Councillor Stallard.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I believe our response to the August flooding events should be proportionate, and I'm not sure that I feel I have sufficient information in front of me financially and otherwise that to remove the library from the long-term plan would be a proportionate response. I think we do need to provide clear direction to staff as soon as possible. To my mind, I would prefer that we have our high-level strategic meeting talking about projects and so on in the next few weeks, and at the next council meeting, we can then provide the kind of direction to staff that is in the deleted second part of point 2 and in the new point 3. And that direction, it might be clearer then, and we might have consensus, hopefully. So at this stage, I prefer that point 3 would be considered at the subsequent meeting.
The only thing I'd note about resolution 3 is it is solely a noting. It actually does not commit the council to anything other than says this is an important discussion that we need to have in the long-term plan.
Yes, just to clarify, I would like that discussion to happen sooner than being open-ended in some way. I would like it to happen at our high-level meeting that's coming up in the next few weeks.
The concern that I have, Councillor Stallard, is if you want to put an alternative project into the long-term plan, and whether it be a $10 million project or a $20 million project or the like, I think it is highly unlikely before we have to advertise the long-term plan in February next year that we will have done the work and the crystallisation of what that alternative proposal would look like. Is that a view that would be shared, Pat? How long, if you were to develop an alternative library proposal, of which there are councillors that would wish to do, to put into the long-term plan, what would be the sort of time frame to develop designs, alternative, explore sites, etc.?
I might just get Mr. White to answer that question maybe more.
Yeah.
But I do know that when we put up the library project, we did look at other options at the time. Whether we can get that off and get that out and dust it off in time, I don't know. But I'll hand over to Mr. White.
So the crisp question is, if the council wants to consider an alternative project of lesser scale, what would be the length of time that officials would need to be able to develop that to the point where it could be included in the long-term plan?
Thanks for the question, Mayor Nick. So it really depends on what council's looking for, I think. So cost is one element. As the chief executive said, there were a number of options that were considered by council in the last long-term plan, 5 different options, I believe, which didn't talk about the components of what could be considered in a library, but actually we've done significant engagement work over the last few months on the components that could be considered in a modern library. So it may not take us too long to start to map that out, but council would then need to consider what is it that council is looking for in a new modern library. And I think that's what this comes back to. And then coming out of that flows, what is this going to cost? Yeah. Site, of course, is another item as well.
Councillor Sanson, and then I think Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I'm wondering if with part 3 of the recommendation, we could just have one word change where it says new library project, whether it could say Maitai Precinct Library Project, because I think what I think the sticking point is that there's a whole lot of us who actually think that the merits of a new library are still really valid, and the sticking point is the kind of location. So
I think that's a helpful amendment. And as the seconder, would the mover be prepared to accept that as amendment? It's accepted by both the mover and seconder. And so the motion that we are now debating is the amended resolution. I just think it gives that clarity that Councillor Sanson rightly says, is we're not saying no new library, we're just simply saying that particular proposal. And remember, recommendation 3 is only that we're noting we're going to consider it. Councillor Pakapaki.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I want to also include another amendment to that. Could we consider the removal and in replacement of continued inclusion? So I think that the connotations of that is that we are just considering whether or not it still belongs or whether or not we take it out. I think that there's a connotation there that we are looking to remove rather than are we going to continue. So the wording would be to remove removal, and replace it with continued inclusion.
I would not support that as a seconder of the current resolution. And the reason is this. I do think we need to have the courage to make some decisions about what is happening and is not. And my view is I am very open to having a discussion about alternative significant projects, the future of the library, what future library facilities. But I do not wish, and I do not think it is helpful either for our community or for the council to be sending the signal that no, this project's still live, still on the books, and that's why I would not support the amendment that Councillor Pakipaki is suggesting. Is there any further? Councillor, Deputy Mayor, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I'm happy to support what is in front of us right now. I think we're getting a little bit into the wordsmithing of, at the end of the day, very few people read council resolutions, save for Max and Skara, who I'm sure will be reading this one very closely. But the meaning of this remains the same, regardless of those words. And that is that we will be considering the future of this project through the annual plan process, which, as Councillor Courtney rightly pointed out, should be starting tomorrow if we actually want an annual plan out the door by July 1st. I think that there is a lot of things that we still need to get up to speed in the consideration of this project, one of that being the project itself for new councillors. What is actually in the budgets there, what was actually being looked at, and the breadth of the alternatives and the wider discussion that was going on behind the scenes. I also think it's going to be crucial to understand the issues with the current library, both in terms of the seismic assessment and tiles, but also, before any of that came to light, the continual conflicting uses, the poor working environment for library staff, And I think we need to understand what the financial implications would be, not just of upgrading that library to be seismically sound, but upgrading it to be functional in its current state. We received, before the library closed, I personally received numerous complaints around conflicting uses of people who want to enjoy and use that space, and finding that there were too many other people wanting to use and enjoy that space in ways that might just slightly have clashed with their idea of the use of that space. And that is a very real issue. We still need to get this council up to speed on the financial impacts and implications from the floods. And that is an ongoing conversation, and one that will be very crucial through the annual plan process. We still need to understand the changing financial environment in which all of this decision making is happening, both in terms of inflation and interest rates. And I know that decision making will never be made in a with perfect information, but I think that by considering this through the annual plan, we can actually get that broader picture. And I hope we can I'll look over at Alec, don some hard hats and actually look at the working environment that the library is in right now, and also meet with the staff that are delivering an incredibly high level of service, to a degree where I'm not sure how they manage to do it with the resources they're currently working with. The one thing I would say is that I think with the review of the project, and let me be clear, we got many things wrong. And from the get-go, in terms of the framing, the consultation, we got things wrong. And we need to actually start from the grassroots of what do people want to see, what do we need, where are our gaps, and build from there. And so I do hope that we can find timing for that review to be able to just fully understand, what a successful project could look like. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. It is my intention to try and bring this debate to a conclusion. So if you're wanting to make a contribution, please indicate now. Councillor Sanson.
Thank you very much, Mayor Nick. I'm just debating in support of this recommendation, and also signalling that I think the consideration of civic investment and the need for improved library facilities is very much still live. And whilst we are going to have to look at priorities in terms of flood recovery, costs are never going to decrease. Like, we are in a time where costs for investment are only increasing. So I think we need to be really careful about pushing projects such as this, which is so critical for our community wellbeing, out indefinitely, because they're only going to get more costly in the future. I also think it's really important that we are thinking intergenerationally, and what is it that we can leave as a legacy for our young people. And this kind of thing is exactly what's needed. We need to be bold and courageous in terms of investing in our city to make it the kind of place that brings our young people back, that keeps our young people here, that inspires them about the future, that gives them hope, and that also attracts further investment into our city. If we have the courage to invest in phenomenal civic infrastructure like a new library community hub in a resilient location, it is going to inspire confidence from other government, commercial, private sector to also increase investment in our city centre. And it's something that's been really lacking in the last decades. I kind of feel in some ways that I left Nelson when I was 17 to go to university and came back when I was 36, and not much had changed. And I just don't think that that's not the future that we should be considering. If we look at places around the country, Tauranga, Lower Hutt, Picton, Motueka, Blenheim, New Plymouth, they're really leaving. Nelson is lagging when it comes to really valuable civic investment. So I hope that, as a team, a governance team, that we can have a really robust discussion about this and come up with something that works for the ratepayers and the residents, so from a financial perspective, but also offers the kind of investment we need to see in the city. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Sanson. It is my intention to try and draw the debate to a close. I think with the amendments, we've got ourselves to a pretty good place. And I think the Deputy Mayor put it quite correctly in the sense of, while we're providing some directions on others, the comments that have been made by councillors about actually there's still a vision around the city and those things is still underlying that discussion to have around those big strategic projects. It is the convention that the mover of the resolution have a right of reply. Did you want to exercise that, Councillor Scott?
Yeah, I'll just be very brief. We've had a lot of almost debate in the question time. I think this is a good signal. It's not removing an investment. It's not putting things on stop or reset. This is, I think, a chance much needed that the community wants to see us is have just a bit of a pause, a chance for the staff to catch their breath, a chance for the public to get their head above water ourselves and just pause for a moment and just see where things need to go. And so I don't think it's foolhardy at all to do this. I think it's very wise. Just give a chance to new council, give a chance to staff to feedback, and a chance for a mayor and fellow councillors just to reassess the best foot forward. And it's about reprioritising. It's not about removing or taking away or adding. It's just reprioritising, shuffling things around, and a chance to just get our heads around it. I don't really want to see us debating whether we should have a library or not today. It's just a chance to pause and refresh. Thank you.
So my intention is to put the resolution 1, 2 and 3 together as a single resolution. With the amendments, I think we've tried to mould something that's clearer about the council's intention. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That is carried. We're going to take our 5-minute break and then we'll return to debate the second item of the Mayor's agenda regarding the long-term plan and flood damage. Thank you very much for your contributions. work. If we allow it to stretch out to 10 or 15, I don't think we can be efficient as we can. So it is my intention to keep those breaks quite short. The second part of my mayoral's report deals with an amendment to the long-term plan. There's going to be the opportunity further in the agenda with the report from our infrastructure manager, Alec Laverdis, to delve more deeply under item number 10. The items that I've noted in my mayoral report is that you can have the expectation that in my mayor's report each month, I do try and cover off the major things that have been in my work program as part of my accountability. The reason the resolution I think is important is because we have a legal obligation where we have significant expenditure to go through a consultation process. And the reality is that we have a massive amount of spending that is occurring by council staff that needs to be noted that it's going to have a significant impact. It is not much more than a noting resolution, but in my view, it's important in signalling that both the mayor and the council are aware of the scale of obligations that are being entered into as part of the response to the flood and storm. It is not committing to the specific amounts. I think it would be remiss of my mayor's report and not having a resolution to not be recognising the scale of what has been taking place out there in Nelson over the last 3 months. So I would like to move recommendation number 4. I have a seconder from Deputy Mayor and open the report dealing with the impacts of the devastating August 22 event, open to debate, as well as resolution 4. I think it's very straightforward. I will take a call from Councillor Courtney.
Well, I'm delighted. I would have liked to have moved it and seconded it, but I missed the opportunity. Others rushed to the cause. But I will just say how pleased I am that we're recognising this, and I can't state too strongly, and I don't want to be negative about it, because we have the strength to work through this, but we have some major challenges, Mayor Nick, as you have highlighted a couple of times already in this early part of the meeting. No question about that at all. The emphasis needs to be on recovery, first, second and third, but also setting a foundation for the future. And while Kahu's concerns about the word in a previous motion being a recommendation, the word removal, he didn't agree with. I didn't either, and I sat here quietly, and I know the mayor wouldn't accept it, but I don't like negativity, and I thought that word removal reeked of negativity when we hadn't even considered the matter. It was a pre-consideration, and it was not appropriate in my view. And this the same with this here. We have got to put everything on the table, because we will be repairing major infrastructure, $40 million to $60 million worth of infrastructure is going to be money is going to be spent on underground, primarily underground infrastructure. But we've got to build it back better. You can't just replace what's there like with like. It's not appropriate to do that. It's not sensible to do that. So there'll be more monies incurred there. And I just cannot stress more. And I want to take the community, we must take the community with us and get them to understand the seriousness of the situation. But not that we aren't going to look to the future. We're not going to cut anything. If I have my way, if we have our way, well, we won't cut anything. We will phase, we will prioritise, rephase, reprioritise. These are the words we're going to use when we're looking at our annual plan and then 2024, our long-term plan. We're going to be full of optimism because we've got so much to be proud of, so much to do. And we have the strengths within this council, I think, to do it. and we get the goodwill of the community behind us, the understanding of the community behind us. And I think we are heading for great things. We've been plagued by 2 years of COVID, severe flooding, and now we've got to get back into recovery mode, and that's first and second. So I'm very happy to support this.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and I'd like to echo the sentiment from my esteemed colleague. Well, of course, we've had a really good summation of the issues regarding the weather event from staff, which has been excellent. There's more detail to come in terms of the impact on council. We're all aware of that. And indeed on the income streams that are going to be able to tackle those implications. I would tend to suggest of a bigger concern to council over the next few years is the inflationary period that we're heading into, and indeed the gathering clouds of probably what potentially could be one of the most devastating recessions that not just New Zealand but the planet has seen. So in some respects, it's a bit of a storm, excuse the pun, coming along that's going to really affect the way that we think about things. However, I would note that we've been down this path before where we've headed into a new term of council and it's been doom and gloom and, you know, we're going to have to throw everything out and start again. You know, it's happened before. And it always amazes me how quickly things seem to bounce back. I know the effect is going to be long, and I'm not wanting to gloss over the impact on council's proceedings, other than to say when things get tough, we need to have continued investment, and we are the body that needs to invest. Nelson City Council needs to show that we can take this in our stride and continue to do the good work that we need to do in other areas as well. It's tremendously important. I've said this many times before, more theatres were constructed in America during the Great Depression than at any other time. That's when they invested, when things were down and people needed work and companies needed work. That's the time to invest. So I do support this, but I think we need to take the wider, more global picture on things. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rainey. I think there is going to be a broader discussion for us to have with the Chair of Finance, Councillor Courtney, about our approach to the broader challenges of both the storm impacts that's noted in this recommendations as well as the broader economic picture. For my piece of it, I do not support austerity. Widespread cutbacks is not the smart way to get through a community. I am more pessimistic about the scale of the economic challenge that our community is going to go through over the next 3 years. I'm at the more gloomy end of how tough it is going to be. Having said that, I'm in that sort of, excuse the parliamentary experience, the Bill English mode of in difficult times, there's just an extra obligation to be really careful about how you're spending money when households are under pressure. And of course, when interest rates are rising sharply, we need to be extra careful about what extra debt that we are incurring that impacts on rates. Deputy Mayor.
Just to be a tad more dry and boring from the interest and intrigue of our past three members, I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page just in terms of what's actually in front of us. The scale of the spend and the number of years that it is programmed over means that our long-term plan is going to have to change, and that will occur through our annual plan process. I just want to signal to members that that is a lot of work and will take significant commitment, not just from our annual plan task force that we're setting up, but from all members if we want to deliver this to the statutory timelines. So everything that the other members have said is true, but there is also some dry and boring, dry and interesting components and mechanisms that we will have to keep front of mind as we go through.
There seems little contention on the motion. There is going to be the opportunity with our infrastructure manager to be able to further talk about the detail of the events and the recommendations further down the agenda. So it's my intention to put the resolution unless there is contention. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, say no. Motion carried. The next item, which is substantial, and that is with respect to the governance structure. I want to emphasise for members, as noted in item 2, that I see this very much as a get us started, get the work underway, get a better feeling for the workload, for the skills, for us all to be involved in all substantive decisions for the next 9 months, and then to do that review. The second thing I would note is that there has been a error that has been changed in the recommendations with respect to the Biodiversity Forum. I was originally advised that there were 3 persons to serve from council on the Biodiversity Forum. The answer is that there is just 1. I have pulled that back to Councillor Stallard. Having said that, I would like Councillor Stallard to raise with the Biodiversity Forum whether they would be open to having extra membership. The Deputy Mayor raised that issue because both he and Councillor Anderson had a very strong interest in the work of the arts, and they were very open to that, and that was helpful. So while we are reducing us to a single appointment on the Biodiversity Forum, there is an informal intention to open up a discussion to see whether that can be expanded. Did you have a comment to make, Councillor Stella?
Yeah, that sounds fine. And I'll take it. I'll be asking for it to be expanded to 3, that the other 2 councillors are keen to be on that forum.
They are.
Okay, 3. Thank you.
So if you could, as the formal appointee, the second thing with the forums where there are multiple members, I think it's very helpful if members informally determine who is the lead, and where there is more than one, for instance, with the community whānau and the like, that there be a lead person and ensure that if there are apologies, that there is some council representation. And so obviously, Aaron, I'm signalling you are the lead with respect to the Biodiversity Forum. There was huge interest in participating in the Climate Change Forum. There are only 2 slots. The Mayor and the Deputy Mayor have sort of exercised their prerogative, but I also would like us to have a discussion with the Climate Change Forum and to see whether we could obtain a couple of extra slots, because I know there are people who have both expertise and passion on that subject area, and it would be good to expand that one as well, and that is an open discussion. The further point I was going to make is that with respect to the terms of references for the task force, a number of them are being determined today, but most are not. One of the most important items on the agenda for that December meeting is to get the work done between now and then on finalising those terms of reference. I'm quite happy for those other task force to be meeting in the interim, but the focus needs to be on trying to get that terms of reference and that scope successfully resolved for us to get the full governance structure up and running. There is also the key issue of the delegation of responsibilities that goes alongside this governance structure, and that too is an important priority for the December meeting. So I would like to move from the chair the full length of recommendations regarding the governance structure and members, covering all 5 areas in the report, down to recommendation number 8 with respect to, actually, should we do all the items, take it all as one motion to recommendation 12? Councillor Sanson.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Just a couple of, I sent through a correction.
Could I just, sorry, just a procedural matter I've been unclear about. So I am moving the resolutions 1 to 12. Is there a seconder? That's to be seconded by the Deputy Mayor. We're now debating or dealing with any questions on items 1 to 12 in the Mayor's report on governance. Sorry, I interrupted.
Thank you. So I've just got one question of clarification and one question of hopefully amendment. One, thanks. So the first is the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum is the name for the Climate Forum. I just wanted to check that. Yeah, great, thanks. And then the second one is around the Community Housing Acceleration Task Force. I was just hoping that we may be able to amend the name of that task force to Housing Acceleration Task Force. It doesn't impact the terms of reference at all, and obviously the mayor and the deputy mayor are both in that task force, so we'll be contributing to the terms of reference, but and we'll be covering off the scope of that task force next week when we have our initial meeting. But there are a number of work streams underway in relation to housing that need progressing to ensure we remain focused on supporting the delivery or the urgent delivery of housing outcomes for our community, and it would be beneficial to ensure there is an effective and efficient mechanism for governance input into these. So I'm just wondering if it's possible, if we can just have it as a Housing Acceleration Task Force.
I do not support that change, and let me be explicit why. I think it's important that the names of these task force are clear with the terms of reference. So if there is to be discussion to expand the terms of reference. Now, in the housing sector, you've got community housing, you have the social housing, as well as private sector housing. Now, we've got some really big issues. For instance, the most important housing of all is the 94% that is private housing, of which we have important decisions to make with respect to the planning process. It is not the intention of the task force to be dealing with Plan Change 29 or the major issues that Dennis Bush-King and his team with. So my difficulty in changing the definition, removing the word community, is it creating an expectation that it is to cover all the types of housing. But can I indicate to Councillor Sansom, there's the question of the social kainga ora state housing. I'm open-minded about that. Can we work on the terms of reference between now and December? And I'm signalling to you that if we refine the name to something, I'm not happy with just housing because that's too broad, but we could refine it, and we could refine it at the time when we come back in December. Is Councillor Sansom happy for dealing with that matter in that way?
Sure.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers that wish to contribute to the setting up of our governance structures? The Chief Executive has asked me to draw your attention to new Resolution 9, adopts the terms of reference for the Joint Committee of the Tasman and Nelson City Councils, the Civil Defence and Emergency Management Group, and the Joint Shareholders Committee, noting that a full review of the delegations register we brought back to the December Council meeting. The reason the Chief Executive and staff have brought that into the resolution is that in the unlikely event, and here's, I'm touching wood, we do get a civil defence emergency between now and December, and we've got no terms of reference that can't do anything. And so I think that's a good argument. And I know that that has been brought late into the piece. If any councillor has any concerns about those terms of reference, I'm happy to include it and for it to be further debated at the December meeting, but just want to get it up and started. If there is no further councillors seeking a call, then I shall put.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Nick, to debate or to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have made explicit. No, the full items of governance are open for debate. So all of the resolutions that I've listed in my mayor's report about setting up the initial governance structure are now open to debate or questions. And Councillor Courtney, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Apologies for being less than clear as chair.
Not at all. Not at all. I thought it was me. Nick, I would say that this is a fresh idea, fresh initiative, and we grow from ideas, don't we? And I'm prepared to say that the introduction of task forces is worth a try. We're going to review it in early next year, aren't we? And whether that's a long enough time to review it, I have some doubts about that, but it's a new way of working. And if that means we're streamlining our processes, that's got to be good, because efficiencies hopefully flow from that, from the new methods. And it'll lead, I hope, because we're shining a light on some of the critical areas that need some traction. I'm thinking of the library. And I'm thinking about other areas too. Civic House that's been drifting for a number of years. There's 7 different task forces. So I commend you for this initiative, and am optimistic that it will mean that we get decisions made expeditiously and we can move forward at pace. And the real attraction for me is the possibility of saving costs, time. So it's up to all of us, I think, to try our very best to make this work.
Thank you to Councillor Courtney. And I would bring Council's attention to the significant resolutions about a joint transport committee with Tasman. Transport is a big part of what we do. It is my view that doing that on a joint basis is a substantive change, but consistent with the direction I indicated at the inaugural meeting of us. We're practical, working as closely as possible with our neighbour Tasman. I want to hand the floor over to Councillor Stella.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I'd just like to briefly comment on that. I see this process by which we arrived at this organisational structure was a good process. I thought there was good input from all councillors. It was handled very well. It was enjoyable. And the fact we have this backstop of reviewing again in 9 months, 8 months or so is a good one. So I'd just like to thank Mayor Nick and all the councillors for the way we participated in this. And I thought it was a good process.
Thank you, and thank you to councillors for the way that they engaged. I have seen some horror debates at councils, particularly around the issues of remuneration. And I want to put on record that the remuneration that is provided both to the Deputy Mayor and councillors is actually pretty poor recompense for the amount of work that is involved. People that sit around this table do it for all the right reasons of serving the community, but it gave me great encouragement that one of the issues that can be the most divisive was resolved so collectively. And so I thank all councillors for that. That being the case, I will put, it was moved and seconded at the beginning by myself and by the Deputy Mayor. I'll need to speak with a louder voice. So moved and seconded, all those in favour in those resolutions through from resolution 1 through to resolution 12, including the terms of reference that were added, that be adopted. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That's an important milestone for the new council to make, and I thank all members. We now move to item number 9, which is the establishment of the Alma Turnbull Library Reopening Task Force. The report's been prepared by Rebecca Van Orden. We have had the opportunity to sort of preempt this debate. It is my intention to move at pace on this issue, and I've indicated to Councillors Skinner, Pakipaki and Stallard that we'll be meeting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm pleased to report that council staff have been moving at pace on this issue. It seems that we will have access to both the we will have access to a draft of the detailed seismic report on Alma Turnbull for that. I also want to flag with council that if necessary to progress any recommendations, because the task force has only the power to recommend, my view is that if it is a matter of time, that it would justify having an urgent council meeting to approve the expenditure to get on with this in the event the task force is confident that there is a recommendation to proceed.
Happy to move.
Move from Councillor Skinner. Is there a seconder from Councillor Rainey? And I'd now ask our staff member, Rebecca, the manager. Sorry? I'm sorry. I'm reading my papers rather than looking up. I'll get there to make any comments about the task force establishment.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and sorry, Rebecca's at a medical appointment. So she's here. So happy to take any questions. This report primarily establishes, as Mayor Nick says, the task force as well as the terms of reference of the task force, so that we can get on with prioritising reopening the library.
Any debate from councillors either about the recommendation, but more particularly, and what is important, is getting these terms of reference right. being quite consistent with the task forces, and that is recommendation powers only. That being the case, I'll put the resolution in item 9, resolutions 1, 2 and 3 that have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. Carried. We now move to item 10, and I'd invite our Group Manager Infrastructure, Alec, to report on all the money he wants to spend.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I will take the report as read. There are no amendments or additions to the report. The report covers quite a few items. In summary, it is to seek retrospective approval for the monies that we have incurred to date in terms of the recovery from the August event, the establishment of a storm recovery task force, which has just been approved, but the terms of reference which are attached. I also give some information in terms of how I will be reporting the recovery effort to council, as well as the task force. There's a resolution that seeks to allow staff to continue with the recovery and retrospectively seek approval for expenses that we will incur to the end of June that won't be wrapped up by the annual plan. And then there's a resolution that I ask for council to consider to make a permanent change to our procurement policy as detailed in the report for projects up to 2 million. Nick, I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
The first question I had for you was a great deal of nervousness about the situation with the water main. You advised us when we did the field trip of the pretty impressive progress that had been made quickly in restoring the mains. Would you be able to provide, given it is probably the most biggest risk item for the city, how work is progressing on replacing the main pipeline from the Maitai dam?
Absolutely. So that's good news. I can advise that the breach in the Maitai raw water pipeline has been rectified and has been made live and is operating back as normal. We are busy working now to look at how we get cyclists and pedestrians across that, and as indicated when we did our site visit, we'll be looking at putting a clip-on walkway along that structure, and that's the next piece of work. But as we speak now, that water has been rectified, has been made live, and we back to normal.
I think that is an extraordinary achievement in the timeframe that council staff, and even if it is just informally, I think the council should congratulate Alec and his team, and particularly the contractors, on fixing what was an incredible risk for the city, and doing it at the pace that it has been done gives me great confidence. And so with the leave of council, would like a note of congratulations to both the engineering staff, your water team and the contractors for being able to deliver that sort of turnaround for that level of damage is a huge credit to yourself and your team.
Happy to support that.
We'll just take that moved and second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, through Mayor and Mr. Levitas. Just clarification on page 56, there might be typos. There's number 6 and number 10. So number 6 just approves expenses incurred to the end of June 2023 will be brought. Will be brought, is that right? Just
are you referring to which clause, councillor?
Number 6 on page 56. Maybe will be typo, but for only just
yes.
Will be.
Yep.
And the other one, number 10, I don't understand that. So number 10, it talks about flood recovery assistance, understand that. And then regards to, and the second part of the paragraph, and that council considers part of the annual plan that rates be charged to all rural properties for flood protection.
Can we firstly deal with Councillor Skinner's question on 6? I think 6 is correct, Councillor Skinner, in that it's indicating that it proves that expenses incurred to the end of June next year is going to be brought forward with them providing quarterly reports for retrospective payment.
I
That is the point.
I think the council's talking about the width should be will, and I think he's correct.
I was trying to work
Yes, yes.
It's only become
You
obvious.
can read
now
a
that-
report many times.
So I'm not
but,
meant to-
I think it's a will.
Not meaning to pick up typos. I generally couldn't work out what they meant by would be. That makes sense. But number 10, bear with me, that last bit we're talking about rates be charged for flood protection. Are we not already got a flood protection rates? Or is this a new?
Can I give some context to this recommendation? Immediately after the local election, there was a great deal of angst in the Kokoroa community. I visited out there. I have to say that I spoke to Pat about it, I think, on the Sunday night. By the Monday morning, he indicated that he was prepared to expedite emergency works for those communities with respect to flood protection works, but that as mayor, I needed to understand that was effectively other Nelson ratepayers paying for works in those catchments, and that there is currently no rate charged in that catchment for it. As a consequence, in the community discussions I had, and I've had 2 community meetings at Kokoroa, I said, hey, look, I just want to get on with the job. And the council staff have been very responsive. But actually, if I was to be pedantic, we have no funding for it. And long term, I actually think both the Whangamau River as well as the Walker River actually need a proper catchment plan. To have a proper catchment plan, you need to have a rate. And so I wanted to signal the community, because I have had experiences where when the going gets tough in a flood, they want all the support from council, but when it comes to having a rate to help contribute to it, they get pretty nervous. And so the reason for recommendation 10, specifically dealing with that, is because I want to give that signal. That is that, yes, we're going to support you through the tough times, but actually you need to financially contribute to the catchment. So it's a good question, because it gives context to what I have discussed with Pat in the response to the emergency. Which one add?
And look, that community was incredibly resilient. I mean, they were grappling with these issues and not complaining. And it was only when we went out there, and Alex's team went out there and saw the scale of the damage that they were trying to fix with their own machinery, etc., that we realised that this was part of our community that had been soldiering on but desperately needed help. So it was a quick discussion with the mayor and myself, because we were the decision-making body at the time, to put some assistance out there, which has been gratefully received and made their lives a whole lot better, on top of the mayor advocating so strongly for alternative forms of access for that valley. But it hasn't mattered up till now, but with climate change and more intense rainfalls, we are going to have to be more proactive in terms of those 2 rivers. So it's timely to start thinking about it.
So
Any further question?
So just can understand, by all means, fully supportive that we as a community as a whole shoulder costs for any community, but just trying to understand, we've got charged flood protection, but don't we already charge? You're saying this is a new charge on top of our, I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm just trying to understand. We have flood protection as part of that.
We don't charge for stormwater or flood protection outside of our urban boundaries. So we're not talking about stormwater, but there will need to be some sort of flood protection rate. Most regional councils do that, but we haven't up until now.
So get that totally correct. We have costs and charges for flood protection, but at present we only charge for the urban, but we don't charge it to rural. Is that my? Through the chair.
My understanding of it is with,
Sorry, through the chair, we only charge up to Gentilani, I think. So everyone on the other side of the Gentilani don't pay. So
okay,
my understanding is that history has been we haven't done anything and we haven't charged them for it. And my view is, I think both the level of development in both those valleys is such that we need to, from both an environmental, climate change, and actually a proper flood protection mode. I was actually incredibly encouraged by the responsiveness of staff. I don't know what the estimate of the level of expenditure of Kokoroa would have been with that machinery. Would Alec or Pat be able to give an indication of scale?
In terms of cost, Nick?
That's right. So what happened in that area is the riverbed rose very rapidly. I was advised that a storm event, even just an annual storm event, could have resulted in further properties being flooded out. That's where excavation machinery was urgently put in there to try and remove that risk as quickly as possible. What would have been of your estimate on the item 10, that excavation work that we provided? Any order of magnitude estimate from?
About 120,000.
About $120,000 worth of work was done. Councillor Brandt.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I just want to clarify that because the Chief Executive, Pat, just mentioned that we don't charge for any outside the urban, but then we heard from our corporate service group manager, Nikki, that it's from the Gentle Annie point. So with 10 and this being highlighted that area has not been included for flood protection, are there other areas that we need to include for future to be reviewed for them, the 10 and not just that one community?
My answer to that is yes, but this is specifically noting the fact that we spent 120 grand in this area, and I wanted to flag with the community, hey, we're going to come and do this, but actually you're going to have to contribute into the pot longer term. Now, I think there's a separate discussion of which I would like Councillor Stallard to lead as part of his responsibilities as a Nelson North councillor with both that community and also the the Walkable Walker community, because my view is both those rivers need to be better managed. That will incur costs. And so I'm going to pass the task as part of his responsibilities as sort of the Nelson North liaison councillor to work through that border discussion. Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Amanda. When this comes back for council to consider as part of the end plan, I'd be really interested to know the implications of such a small rating base covering that cost in comparison to the cost of everybody from Gentle Annie back into town bearing the cost. I presume that the impact will be greater on this. I don't know how many ratepayers there are in the Kokura community. I was under the impression there were only 27 people. So I presume that through you, Amanda,
the issue, and if I was to fairly report to you what the views of residents were, is that they're happy to pay the rate as long as the forestry companies that make up the bulk of those two catchments are also doing so. And so you're absolutely right. There'd be quite a small number of farms and lifestyle type blocks, but there'd be quite a number of others. I just think we need to keep our focus today. The resolution is just a noting that this has occurred. And the main reason that I had raised it with council staff is that I wanted to socialise with that community. We're coming to your aid, but actually it would be fair if you're also contributing financially. Are there any other items under item 10 with those long list of resolutions dealing with the storm recovery and also dealing with the storm recovery task force? Councillor Sanson.
Thanks so much, Mayor Nick. So I've just got a few questions about the procurement policy change. Is that okay to ask that?
Yeah, this is a good time to raise it. That's recommendation number 7.
7, yeah, great, thanks. I did send my questions through to officers in advance. I'm just wondering if kia ora, Officer Lourdes, Alec. I'm just wondering if you can remind us what the current procurement policy limit is.
So maybe I'll just take you back a wee bit. I won't talk for long, but as part of our response to addressing the COVID-19 issue, as well as the supply chains, where we, as you know, I don't need to regurgitate that, but there were a lot of issues involved in terms of having contractors on site. The supply lines were being affected, costs were spiraling. And we put a proposal to council to implement a streamlined procurement process at that time to include essentially projects up to a maximum of $2 million. The tender subcommittee sits outside of that, and I'll cover that a little bit later. So the way that works is that we work with the Contractors Federation, the local branch, and we assign projects across the entire group up to a value of $2 million to approve that. It still allows contractors who wish to apply and submit prices for other jobs. They have the right to do that, and that was extended, as I've noted in my report, up to 2023, June 2023, and it was going to be revisited then. bearing in mind that we knew there was a new council on board, and we thought that would be the opportune time. However, that process has worked extraordinarily well, and in line with the issues that we faced with the August 22 event, we thought it would be pertinent to formalise that streamlined process. So that's the background. In terms of, and that's been in place for about three years. And as I indicated during the inductions, that process has been independently audited. Our contractors are fully supportive of that, and that has required us and entailed us the ability to spend the majority of our capital works program. Anything bigger than that, we still go out to open tender, and we use the early contractor involvement. So that gives the background. Then there's the tender subcommittee, and the tender subcommittee's current delegations approve any contract over 2.5 million, and that goes to whoever sits on that committee as per the previous report. And ordinarily we would have reported all our contracts awarded through the relevant committee, and we need to figure out how we report award of contracts across the council to this council in terms of governance.
I want to keep the discussion quite tight to the specific recommendations on the procurement, and they're good questions because this is important. Certainly my experience in both the Christchurch earthquakes and Kaikoura was that some of the procurement policies were an inhibitor to being able to respond, get best value for money, and that is the reason for the change, which I'm pretty supportive of. A further question, Councillor Sanson.
Yeah, sorry, I really appreciate the background. I still haven't had my actual question answered yet. What is the current limit on the procurement policy? So it's been, the proposal is to formalise the 2 million. I'm just wondering, in the current procurement policy, what is the limit at?
In the procurement policy, it is open tender, depending on the limits. I think it's we have to go to open tender.
On everything? Even like $50,000?
Oh no, 50,000. Nikki, can you help me out? I don't.
Is there any guidance
deal in
on
those small values.
What is the current limit where there does not need to be a competitive tender process for such works?
I think it's 100.
Guidance?
So through the chair, I think we're mixing up things here because there is currently a streamlined procurement exemption that is in place, and this is exactly 2 million as well.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm asking because we are today making a decision to make this permanent, and I think it's just really good at a governance table that we actually understand what it is that we're doing. So we have a procurement policy. What is the current limit for
my understanding of the answer we've just received, and I'd seek guidance from either staff member, is that there actually isn't a change in the $2 million limit. What is changes is the procurement policy for those underneath that to a streamlined process. If I interpret that correctly?
It would be correct.
Okay, that's great, thanks. So then I just want to check, is there any risk from a governance perspective that we're going to have less kind of oversight of procurement and contracting? It sounds to me like not, but I just want to be, I would just like to kind of,
I would envisage not. I think, we still need to work out the mechanism by which we advise council which contracts have been awarded. And I have no issue in terms of how we do that and when we do it. We just need to figure out how we do that in terms of who we report to. But we are not changing anything that we haven't done previously, and we will happy to report that to council in whatever format they wish.
And so then just the final question, obviously, if there's a particular area where elected members have, or the governance table has specific interest, I'm just thinking, we have Section 17A reviews. There's some of those that the governance table have particular interest in seeing them come to the table. I'm thinking venues management, forestry obviously is this particular interest. I just want to make sure that by approving this today, we're not going to lose the ability to have governance oversight and input into some of those areas where there's particular governance interest.
My general, and I've come from the civil contracting industry, is I have spoken strategically about my view of the governance management area. I'm one of those that says that councillors' involvement in tendering decisions actually needs to be reasonably cautious. My view is that we set budgets, we tell our staff to go off and get good value for money. And while for the really big ones, there are good questions for us to ask, my view is that elected representatives such as ourselves need to be more cautious in the broad direction that I would said of making decisions about whether Fred does the job or whether John does the job. My view is, I'm sorry, Pat, that's more in your league. And the proper responsibility. And that is also partly about managing the conflicts of interest that elected members can have when they get into that space. So that is one of the reasons that I'm supportive of Alex's recommendation number 7. Is there any other person that wishes to raise questions or further debate resolution number 7? I'm just trying to keep the debate a bit focused.
Yeah, no, I think, thanks.
I've got a comment from the Deputy Mayor.
Just to clarify, I also agree. I'm not wanting to get involved in whether Fred or Sam does the job. I'm wanting to make sure that how the job gets done and what the scope of the job is. I'm thinking forestry, council's forestry, that's a big discussion for this triennium. And I'm just wanting to double check, I guess, be reassured that approving this today isn't going to have unintended consequences in terms of the trajectory of,
Can I ask the first question to help Councillor Sanson? And that is, as a consequence of this recommendation, will that make any changes to the way in which the council procures forestry services?
So forestry services, I think, is I think not. No, I think forestry will the decision surrounding forestry, whether we stay in or not, will be a council decision, and whatever flows from that. So I don't think this is not meant to usurp any of the other decisions that sit around this table.
I'm happy to move. Can I just ask the Deputy Mayor to make a contribution, and then I'll come to yourself, Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, so maybe this is between Nikki and Alec, is just really wanting to understand in terms of the actual changes to the procurement policy. So we had our wonderful streamlined process. We're now formalising that into our actual procurement policy. So the change between what had to be open competitive versus what has to be open competitive now is what? Because I know, putting aside the streamlines that we've used, our procurement policy itself, what is the value in there that has to be an open competitive tender?
So through the chair, it's currently over 500,000.
Okay, so so with that, that's with group manager approval. I'm just also then curious around those tests as well. So for when we're going up to the 2 million, is that where the line still sits for what requires group manager approval, whether we'll be adding in CE approval at anything?
It will be at group manager level. The majority will be for me to sign off, yes.
Councillor Skinner?
Up to 2 million.
Sorry, just a couple more. And so with that, is this procurement, because the procurement policy obviously covers multi-year contracts as well, is this just for physical works?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I think it would be useful if perhaps after this we can just get circulated the actual changes to the procurement policy. If I can make that request.
So can that be noted? To be circulated is a document that sets out what would be really helpful, I think, I've got an interest in this area as well. Actually, my interest is the biggest job, I think, for Alec and infrastructure manager Alec and his team, is actually contractors are so damn busy at the moment, they don't want to bother with the small fry stuff and to actually get the damn work done. He and his team are having to work hard to actually find people that will do it. On the contracting end, and this is giving some flexibility to get it done. But what we're going to do is to get a document circulated that shows the old procurement policy and has the sort of the word track of how it changes it, and for that to be circulated to all councillors, please. I just want to, Councillor Skinner.
I was just indicating happy to move the recommendations as a whole, 1 through to 11.
It's moved. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sanson. I just now want to provide Chief Executive Pat with the opportunity to comment on recommendation 11.
So, thank you, Mayor Nick. So recommendation 11, it means what it says. You'll recall when I briefed you through the induction process on our staff vacancies. We're still probably now sitting slightly above 10% staff vacancies. Turnover is still sitting at 18%, and I've just been talking to another couple of CEs in New Zealand whose turnover is much worse than that. So we absolutely don't have the resources to run this recovery program and deliver everything that's in the capital budgets for this year and next year. So as Councillor Courtney has said, and I don't like to be negative about this, but we just can't do everything. Yes, we will try and bring in additional resources, but the recruiting challenges are enormous, and we will use consultants, but they are fighting in the same space for staff as we are. There are not enough people in New Zealand to do everything that's required at the moment. So we will have to take some stuff out of the annual plan. And that's going to be a challenge, because usually when there's a vote to take something out, it's always about 8.5 to keep it in. And then we go on to something else and it's 8.5 to keep it in. It's never the same 8 and the same 5, but every project stays in. This year, that just can't happen. Even if we could afford it, the staff just won't be able to do it. And if we put much more pressure on them, they'll leave for somewhere else. So please, when you vote, hopefully you vote for recommendation 11, but there is a responsibility on you. And I'm sorry it's not a good task for so many new councillors, but we're very serious about it. Thank you. Thank you.
I thank Chief Executive for those comments. It is a brutal reminder of how hard that stuff is. I do want to just test with council. I've been given both Pat and the team the signal that flood recovery is and remains our #1 priority. And if there was councillors that had a strongly different view to that, we'll need to provide a forum to do it, because the worst thing for our Chief Executive is getting mixed signals about what is required. Now, I have comments from Councillor Courtney first, I think, then I'll come to Councillor Pakihi. Apologies.
Thank you. I haven't commented through you, Mendick. I've got a question to Officer Libertus. Going back to the Mayor's original question about the pipeline replacement up to Maitai and the success of that. Flowing on from that, I have a question about our policy or your approach to replacing this damaged infrastructure. Is it one of just like for like, or have you really got a firm position on building back better? I think that's and what implications do that have for our costings and that type of thing? So could you help me understand that better, please?
Yeah, so through Mendick, the replacement and the reinstatement rather of the pipeline was a specialized piece of work. We needed to construct a special Bailey sort of bridge that could hold the new pipe, and then that would connect into the existing pipes on either side because of the damage that was suffered from the slip. There's certainly no ways that we could address that slip. So what we have done is we have replaced like with like via a different structure. There will still be access for walking and cyclists, but in terms of our recovery for the rest of the items that are on our list, we are certainly looking at putting additional resiliency and not necessarily just putting in back like for like. That would not be a good idea. So each of those recovery projects will be considered as individuals, and we're certainly looking at a betterment in some cases.
And Councillor Courtney, the task force that we're establishing of myself, Matty Anderson, and of Trudy Brand will be there to scrutinise some of that. And that is a trade-off between how much more resilient, and how much more cost. And there are no perfect answers to that. It will be a bit course by course as we deliver each of those. And it is my expectation if they get to really big level of choices of multiple millions of dollars, that the task force will bring it back to the full council. Councillor Pakipi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanting to backtrack a little bit. I've got a question for the General Manager. Going back to item number 7, just with our procurement. How many contracts current live contracts that have yet to be concluded would fall under this new policy change that the council currently have? So that's the first part. Second part is, do we have any pending contracts that would be disqualified under the previous system that will be now qualified for this? That are basically on your table at the moment?
I wouldn't be able to tell you offhand the number of projects, but there's probably off the top of my head, probably about 10 to 15. No, none of those would be disadvantaged because the exemption that has been approved is to the end of June 2023 anyway. So what we're asking for is to formalise that process. So nobody will be disadvantaged either way.
So can I just be clear, because I was not, the approval of the procurement policy in agenda item and resolution number 7 is simply until June 23.
No, it has been up until June 2023. What I'm actually asking for is to make that permanent.
Okay, correct. I'm clear. Good. That's right. What the original bit was what I understood. Any further queries? Councillor Sauer.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I just wanted to comment briefly on that flood recovery is our number one priority, which I agree with in a general sense. It's very important. I think there are nuances to that. For example, my understanding is that the Marlborough Council, they're having some difficult conversations about some roads that simply might not be repaired. So if we argue it in black and white sense, it's the number one recovery priority, we'd repair all those roads. So there is some difficult decisions, and I also believe we might also consider there are some overarching work streams that are also very important, and that we should make every effort to make sure they can continue, as well as recovering from these floods as well as possible. And I'm thinking here, for example, of climate action. So I just want to mention that there is a nuance there.
And my understanding of the scale of the problems in my discussions with our neighbouring mayor is that Marlborough have some very difficult decisions with a road recovery bill probably north of 100 million. I do not think there'll be any areas, Alec, where we will not be returning infrastructure. I would expect where it's contentious, and we'll note our neighbours in Tasman have got a difficult decision around Ruby Bay. I would expect any of those to come back to full council for us to be able to make those trade-offs. Councillor Pakipi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just referencing the Chief Executive before mentioned that the difficulties has been with that potential of the division. Is that because when trying to approve or remove, has that been because they have been assessed on a case-by-case basis? And do we need to change our considerations around to compare those against each other and sort of on the merits of the entire recovery itself, so that those ones then get balanced out that way rather than a case-by-case basis?
Exactly. It's been done on a case-by-case basis, sitting around a council table, and there's been a list of projects. Are they in or they out? And almost all of them stay in. And I think what we probably need is a workshop where each councillor gets given 10 sticky notes and gets them to put them against the projects they want to stay in. And then there's a vote to formalise what has happened. It needs to be something like that, on the understanding that X million dollars needs to come out of the budgets because we just can't deliver it. So we'll need some sort of flexibility in terms of the workshop to come to a consensus position where most councils will probably see one or two of their favourite projects deferred for a few years in light of the greater good. Yes.
If there is no further comments, I am keen to make progress. I intend to put resolutions in item number 10 from 1 to 11 to council. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. We're going to take a morning tea break, which will need to be kept tight to 10 minutes before we move to item 11. Thank you.
One of the
Move to item 11, invite Nikki MacDonald before us. I've had some helpful guidance from the Chief Executive that I'm not quite doing it right in providing a clear separation between the question part of a deliberation item and the discussion. So I apologise to the experienced councillors. My lunar plates are proving true. And on this item, I would like to get a greater degree of clarity about when we're in the question phase and when we are in the debating phase. It is for the establishment of the Local Government Reform Task Force. Councillors have been provided for the draft terms of reference, and I'll ask Nikki MacDonald to present the item.
Thank you. And through the Mayor, yes, so this is to establish a local government reform task force. There's a lot of government reform coming at council that needs to be considered and have governance guidance for staff. Most immediately probably is the local government reform part of it, because in fact we are having a visit from the panel in December, and we'll be arranging a workshop for all elected members before that. We have an external expert who has worked with us through this process, and they'll be coming again to take you through what's in the draft report from the panel, or the report from the panel, and to facilitate your discussion about what you might want to give as feedback to the panel. So that day in December when they are visiting, that is a Te Teo Ihu opportunity to get together. So it won't be just this council. So I think it's also important that we do a written submission back to on the report back to the panel. And so this task force would be very useful in helping staff put that draft together so that we can get that back to council at its first meeting in the new year in time for it to be submitted before the end of February. Thank you.
Any questions of either our Group Manager Strategy and Comms around the recommendations and the establishment of the Local Government Reform Task Force? Probably the most important area is just those terms of reference and making sure we've got that scope correct. It is my view on this legislative program that the submissions again come back to full council after the task force has done its work, and that is going to put some pressure on the timetable. Councillor Stour.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I just noticed in the purpose and the terms of reference that this task force is to look at the local government review panel, but also other areas of government reform such as Three Waters. So that's another huge workload. So just to be clear, are we going to take on everything, or is it immediately the local government reform and then decide later about how we handle Three Waters?
My perspective as Mayor and the proposed chair of this group is that it will be the oversight group, because someone actually has to make sure that the Nelson City Council can't sort of go off in this direction on one area and this direction on another. But you're absolutely right. Three Waters is huge all on its own. And so I would expect the task force relatively early and soon to have a specific 2-hour session on Three Waters. But the intention is the terms of reference to include Three Waters within it. And the reason I think that makes sense is because you can't separate the Three Waters debate from the debate that's going on around the planning reform, from the debate that's going on around the latest local government review report. So the intention is this task force would develop the council's position on all of those. And here's the other part that's quite difficult, just be quite open. There are going to be some areas in this local government review where there will be strongly held different views around the council table. I just want us to be relaxed about that, and relaxed in the sense that actually we're not going to get to decide, we're going to inform it. And in some of the submissions, I have felt council and Local Government New Zealand has tried too hard to squeeze a majority decision, where I'd much rather our submission might say that of the council, there are 8 councillors that are supportive of retaining the voting age at 18, whereas there are 6 who favour it being lowered. And being quite relaxed about actually people will have different views on those sorts of things, and that is just fine. And that's how I would prefer that we would manage it. Okay, that's the end of the questions, so that I'm on the right track, Mr. Chief Executive. I'd now put up for debate, and is someone prepared to move the recommendations in item 11? Thank you, Councillor Stanson. Is there a seconder? Councillor Rollo has second resolution 1, 2, 3 and 4 on this item, and is now open to debate. That being the case, the resolution we put. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carried. We come to item 12, local bodies professionally conducted poll. Pip Jameson, I'd invite to the manager. Who's the manager that's taking the lead on this paper? No hurry. To be fair to staff, it's probably proper for me to give an overview that I asked this to come to council and to give you the perspective of which was brought to it. I have a strongly held view from 30 years as a parliamentarian that the voting system belongs to the electors, not the elected. And this is one of the areas where we have a huge conflict of interest. In my early parliamentary teams, there was the huge debate over whether New Zealand switched from the first past the post electoral system to MMP. I was one of those that supported MMP, but felt it was not for Parliament to decide, it was for the people to decide. Now, the reason this matter has come up relatively quickly is that there are a series of quite significant issues around STV, around participation in voting, as well as the issue of the ward system. My view is that if you are going to get feedback, we need to do this quickly, because people will very quickly forget what occurred in the local body elections. And so the intent in asking for this paper to be prepared before council was that we get a random poll done sooner rather than later. So that's just a bit of background as to why I have asked this paper to come forward and at short notice. I think it is going to be particularly important to get some information, factual information, as the local government reform group that we've just set up prepares its work as well in the discussion with central government. So that's just the context of which the paper was requested by myself and brought forward by officials. I now pass over to them to present the report.
Thank you through the chair. I think there's no changes or updates to the report. I think we can probably take it as read, unless anything to add. No, so just if there are any questions.
Sorry, Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through the mayor. It says in the recommendation that there is no cost or time required. How do you arrive at that point?
Sorry, the question of cost.
We haven't sought exact pricing on this, but we anticipate it would be between 15,000 and 25,000 based on similar quotes from other providers through the chair, but we would certainly confirm that.
Okay, so therefore I have option 1 on page 79, I feel is misleading, as it states that there is no cost or time required in the advantages. Oh no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Option 2, sorry, carry out. There isn't a identified budget, just says unbudgeted cost. So I'd like it to be highlighted that the, or noted somewhere that the cost of 15 to 25K may be required if option 2 is proceeded with.
I'm sorry, I was distracted in trying to get my hub system to work. Are you able to address?
We can certainly note that those would be the indicative costs, and we would be.
I'm struggling to hear you.
Apologies. We would certainly note that they would be the indicative costs, and we can add that to the report, certainly. Sorry.
Yes.
It will be corrected in the minutes. Apologies. Yeah.
Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Do you have any indication or can you provide any information on how the poll would be undertaken, what the method would be?
Again, we would, through the chair, through the provider, we would seek recommendations on the methodology, but we imagine it would be a mixed online, written and phone, so that would be the mix to make sure that people could participate fully in that.
I appreciate that, and just needed to say that I think phone polls are extremely misleading, since quite a growing proportion of our population don't have landlines.
Councillor Sanson.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. So through the chair, I have kind of probably three questions. I think, first of all, we heard that there are issues with STV, and I'm just wondering what they are. I understood that STV is a more representative system, so I'm a little unclear what the issues with STV are.
Well, I would draw the councillor's attention to the contribution that was made by Councillor Benge in his inaugural speech. The substantive criticism that I've heard from voters around STV is its complexity. That is that with a first past the post system, it's very easy to understand exactly how many votes each voter got. STV is substantially more complex. I'm not advocating one view or the other. I'm just simply saying, when I sat on the Justice Select Committee inquiry into the 2019 local elections nationally, those areas that had chosen to use STV had lower levels of participation than those that use first past the post. And I think we have a joint challenge around the electoral system of, one, trying to make sure it's fair, but also trying to maximise participation. And I think it is a substantive change that was made at the 2022 local body elections in moving from ticking to ranking, and that the purpose of the poll is to find out, well, what did the voters think? Councillor Brand.
Oh, sorry.
So you have a second question.
I've got two more questions. I'm just wondering, is it correct that Nelson has a higher participation in elections than the national average, including in the last election?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And then the final question is it the intention of this poll that we are, through a randomised poll, going to be asking the general population their views on the Māori ward?
The ward system, generally speaking, which would incorporate but not be limited to the Māori ward, is intended for incorporation in the poll questions, yes.
So it's likely that there's a question in this randomised poll asking the general population what they think about the Māori ward?
I think the answer you received was no. The intention is to ask a question about wards, but I've had a discussion with the Deputy Mayor, and the suggestion is that in terms of developing the questions, that staff would work with the task force that we've just established to make sure that it is quite focused on the issues. And I think, and it may be worthwhile what is being suggested is an amendment that gives councillors greater involvement in the type of questions.
Yeah, so I'd probably just like to signal and have it noted, if possible, that I feel really uncomfortable about any question to the general population about the Māori ward. I just don't think that it's appropriate to be asking the general population about the Māori ward. But okay, thanks.
Can we perhaps note that that is not the intention? I'll go Councillor Brand, then back here. Councillor Brand, we're in the question section, just so I'm doing my sharing job right.
Thank you.
And you will have all the contribution to once we've resolved to clarify.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I just want to clarify managing community expectations around a poll of this being carried out. Is there a brief or a blurb or something going to explain that this is just seeking information, or for the poll? And I'll explain why once I've heard your answer.
Yes, indeed, that can be done and we can clarify that.
Okay. The reason why I asked for that, through the Mayor, is we have a review process of how often the electoral voting system happens, and we carried that out in our timeframe last year. So if the expectation is that this poll would generate a review of that for the next election, that comes at a cost because it's outside of our review cycle. And I just want to highlight the potential that this may plant a seed of community expectation, but they need to understand that comes at a cost.
Other questions before we move to debate? Oh, sorry, Councillor Pakapaki.
So my question was actually, we're talking about a lot of cost cutting and we're aligning a lot of our decisions in terms of our flood recovery and the entire budget. And then on the other hand, we're also then starting to starting to look at these sorts of quite significant, not insignificant costs. Do you think that is a prudent thing for us to do at this stage, considering all of the other factors that we're considering?
Perhaps I might have a crack at answering that one. So where I was talking about cutting costs is in the big capital projects and trying to reduce our workload. This will be a little bit of extra work for the team, but we would be looking that most of the work would fall on consultants. There would have to be a report written to present back, so there'll be a little bit of extra work, but not unreasonable. If we had thought that was too much work, we would have put that in the report.
I don't think my question was about the amount of work or the overload for the council staff. It was more the cost, the actual expenditure for those consultants.
So $15,000 to $25,000 is not going to break us, I don't think, in terms of our total budgets. Yeah, the mayor has asked us to present this.
Okay, thank you.
We don't think it's unreasonable.
I've just been clarified. I was, yeah. Yeah, so that's, I was thinking that was the binding.
Are there any further questions before we open the item up for debate? Councillor Bench.
I hope I didn't trigger this whole thing in my speech. It was my understanding that the Maori ward couldn't be changed. So that if we looked at the system, that isn't a question that would be up for debate because it's there and it's there for good. So we wouldn't be questioning that, which I think was what was being concerned about.
So can we get the advice from officials as to the question Councillor Benj has raised about change?
When a Māori ward is first implemented or established, it's in place for 2 elections. So it's in place at least until after the 2025 local election.
And as a matter of clarity for councillors, my understanding is that in terms of the change to STV and the change to the ward system, it would not be possible to change the system for the 2025 election without a referenda. That is because the review was conducted in the last term. Is that, do I correctly understand that? It's not just the Maori ward, but the switch to STV and to the wards that were established for the 2022 election could not be changed without the council resolving to have a resolution or a referendum being triggered by 10% of our electors requesting it. Am I correct on that? You're allowed to say the mayor's wrong.
I'm just trying to remember the status in relation to the Local Electoral Act.
And you're also allowed to say...
You're certainly, council can resolve to, as Councillor Brand has pointed out, council can resolve to hold another representation review earlier than the legislatively required 6 years. You have to, every 3 years anyway, reconsider the voting system. So that's the FPP versus the STV question. The ward system would be probably you can go through another representation arrangement, but remembering that but remembering that the Māori ward is in place until after the 2025 election, and it must be accompanied by some other form of general ward system. You'd be reviewing what the general ward system looks like for 2025 rather than removing a ward system altogether for that election. Does that make sense?
Yes, in fact, the mayor is incorrect that it can do it and it can resolve it. But you said it far more politely to that.
Sorry if I made the mayor was slightly correct.
Oh, that's an improvement. What a good deputy mayor.
And that for the voting system, when you resolve to change, that change stays in place for the next 2 elections and any other related elections in that time, by-elections, all of that, unless council resolves for a binding poll or 5% of the electoral roll signs a petition demanding one. The Māori Ward, with the Māori Ward Amendment Bill to the Local Electoral Act 2001, means that that mechanism does not exist. That is definitely in place. General Ward's same answer as STV.
So I think I got a 6 out of 10 rather than 2. Rohan gave me an improved mark. Are there any further questions for officials before we debate? Sorry, Councillor Roller.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. Just a quick question. It's obviously in the local government review that one of the recommendations is having a nationwide voting system of potentially being STV. If we go out and do this poll and we find out a majority of our community don't support STV, are we running a big risk there of going, actually, our community don't support STV, but it's what we're going to have to use long term anyhow?
Yeah, there are certainly some simultaneous processes that are underway at the moment. I think it's still interesting to go out to the community and find out what they think, not least because even if the decision is taken at a national level, we hear back through that feedback process where we need to improve in our education with the community. We did well, this is a bit of self-patting on the back, to be fair, and certainly with our communication and media team did a wonderful job this time around, but identifying, where there are groups that we could have enhanced the education and information for, or where there are different channels and ways of sharing that information that could have been used. I think that regardless will be useful for us. Thanks.
Last question for officials. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks very much, Mayor Nick, through the chair. So I think I'm hearing that officers are actually supportive of this because they think we may obtain some information that is beneficial to the organisation and trying to increase enfranchisement or voter participation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear back from the community after the fact.
Okay, thanks. I'm happy to support then.
Thank you. We'll now let our officials go and I'll try and run this place a bit more efficiently and now have a debate. I'm going to move from the chair the resolution, but with the indulgence of the Deputy Mayor, include in the resolution his amendment that's been added, which is helpful, ensuring that the Local Government Reform Task Force is delegated the input about getting the questions right. I want to speak about why I think we should do this. Regardless of what decisions we make in this council, there is going to be a debate around why it is that for 30 years there's been declining participation in local government. And I think that is really important. We do need to get on top of the fact that whether it is Nelson, and it is true that Nelson has a higher level of participation at about 51 as compared with the national average of 41, actually having good factual information, not what we think, what Auntie said, what my university son said, actually good factual information to help inform the debate around how we improve participation. Around the debate of STV, diverse first past their post, there will be different views. But it is equally my view that that actually is a decision for the person carrying the votes out, not those of us that are elected as a consequence, and that it is absolutely proper for us to ask them what they think. I do have a slightly different view to Councillor Rainey in respect of the accuracy of random polls. And when I spoke in my inaugural speech at our first council meeting, and I said that we needed to develop new tools for engaging with the public, I include random polls in those. And my experience with polls is that they are exceedingly accurate. I'm happy to confess that during the course of the local election campaign, I commissioned an independent poll, and in terms of the mayoral election, was accurate to a degree of less than 0.5%. It frightened me as to how accurate it was. Those polling companies today have very sophisticated systems to include all mobile phones, and they do, in my view, actually provide with it. Now, whether at the end of the poll, it doesn't commit you to necessarily change the system. I also think it would be very useful for us to say, what were the most useful channels? What's the information that people provided? around the changes of electoral systems. When I discussed it with the Minister of Local Government, Nanaia Mahuta, she strongly encouraged me to do the poll because we were in a very interesting situation in the debate of local elections being STV or being first past the post, in that our voters had recently experienced the change. And so they are the reasons why, for the expenditure, that I actually think we can all have our opinions, but actually doing a proper, independent, scientific poll on this question will be helpful to answer the questions around wards. Did people like them? Did they not? And I know there are views around this council table expressed by Councillor Benge during the inaugural debate. There are views around STV. I think we should include a question around the voting age. We may be surprised by the result, but it's good to know. I think we should include a detailed question around what would make it easier for those that did not vote to participate in the voting system and to tease out that important issue. And that is why I have moved and support the resolution and seek a seconder. Deputy Mayor has seconded the resolution. Did you want to speak?
Yes, just briefly. And I do take Councillor Rainey's point in that not all polling methodologies are equal. For example, my election poll of walking down the street and finding there are 20 people who would talk to me incorrectly predicted landslide victory. Should have gone to the phones. But I do think that this does have significant benefit in understanding where our engagement is dropping off in local elections. We know that nearly 50% of our population who can vote don't vote, and that the gap between turnout for central government elections versus local government elections is significant. And anything that we can do to better understand where that gap is coming from and how we can play a role in closing it is crucial. Also understanding where confusion exists around STV and the ward system is just as useful for if we continue with it. I mean, I personally am a very strong believer in STV. Whilst it seems confusing initially, for me the joy is that it actually removes all of the background thinking that one must do in terms of vote trading and strategic voting. But that's a conversation for another day. Fundamentally, though, this is a move that will just enhance our understanding of where the community's at and allow us to build a picture from there.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Other speakers to the resolution? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that. I just put it to the chair. We've got this extra part in here amended with the task force inputting the questions. I support strongly that we get a poll on this, and as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, in regards to the public own that side of it on how we voted, and a good point about the way it's polled. It's really a professional organisation with the skill sets to decide how the best way to get a accurate poll, and it's just as important how you word those questions in a poll. So I'm not comfortable and cannot support number 3, because I think that is a very much part of the professionalism and skill set on how you word and what the questions, because it's very easy, unintended, for us as a committee to put questions there and with an unintended consequence get the answers that we may not want.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. Can I just, because I'm always trying to find solutions, it is absolutely true, in my dealing with professional polling companies, is that they won't allow you to put biased questions in. And there's all sorts of funny and naughty tricks that you can play around getting the right outcome. The funniest one I always thought was where people on gun control, and if you ask them a question at the beginning as to, is there too much violence in society, and a series of questions that warmed you up, and then do you support stronger gun control? And then if you have a whole series of preceding questions about people need more military support, and you get exactly the opposite answer. Now, what I would assure you is that professional polling companies will not allow you to do that. Where Councillor Skinner has a fair point is it may be better for the second resolution to have the topic of the questions. Because where I support, I think it was Councillor Sanson about the Maori ward, We have no choice on that. We do not want to have a question on that. I think it would be divisive. So I wonder if the last resolution could be amended, agrees that the local government reform task will delegate responsibility for the topics of the polling questions rather than leaving it to the professionals for the way, and whether that would satisfy your concern, Councillor Skinner, and I'd be happy to have a discussion on that.
Partly, and may do. My concern is obviously in the report, we've decided what we're trying to gain or gather, the knowledge we're trying to gather from the community. But my concern still is that we've got, as a councillors, putting in the questions or topics that could have the effect the same as us deciding how a poll is run.
I think for the polling company, you actually have to give them direction as to what you're seeking. And that is my view, is it's perfectly proper for the task force to raise the topics, but we should actually leave it to the professionals to frame the question in a neutral way.
I'd like to see the words up there, and I understand.
Let's have some further discussion. I'm going to take Councillor Paki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I'll echo the sentiments of Councillor Skinner, and I understand exactly the point that he's coming from, and being involved in a lot of the polls that around crime and justice and that in the past and criminogenic contributions to that. I'm fully aware of the task that they've got set for them. However, I think that we have a contribution to make, and I think that idea of the topics is a really good one, Mr. Mayor, because it gives us, we reflect the sensitivities of our community. We're not here as a benign, completely objective wanting them to disregard all of the subjective aspirations that we have as a community. So I think it's a good thing for us to have a level of contribution to talk to them, not necessarily determine what the outcomes are going to be. So I do respect that methodology. I think it should be followed, but I think we also, we represent our community, so we should have at least a level of those sensitivities. So go on.
Thank you for that contribution. Can I check with the seconder whether he is happy with the amendment to change the word to topics in the resolution? Is there other councillors that would like to make a contribution to the debate? Councillor Stella.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. It is important to know what the public's experience is and how we can improve participation. I just would note that some of the main factors will lie outside of the scope of this poll, obviously, that determine voter turnout. Also, these changes we've just brought in for the recent election, there are two important aspects. One is process, so that's the voter experience and so on, and the other is outcome. So if we conduct a poll today, we will have a good feedback on process, not so much on outcome at all, because the outcome is the composition of the council, how the voters choose to interact with ward councillors and how they perceive their roles as opposed to at large and so on. And that will unwind during the course of the term, I think. So not saying I don't support this, but I think if we were to conduct this poll after the next election, we would be sampling both process and outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Stallard. Other contributions? Councillor Benj?
I would support this on the basis that there isn't a question about the Maori ward, and as far as the money goes, it's about democracy, and that's pretty important. And I don't think the amount of money that we're talking about, money always matters, but I don't think it really matters in this case because we're talking about democracy. I'm not sure about the age thing. You might get lots and lots of young people voting, then it changes the whole thing. It might have to be balanced with a question about doubling the pension. But anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Benj. Councillor Pakipaki.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this may come as a bit of a surprise to you all, but I actually support the idea of having some questions about the Māori ward. In particular, I would like to, the question, and it's a benign and it's an objective one, is do you whakapapa Māori, and are you on the general roll or the Māori roll? Because that will give us a bit of an idea of what the representation of the Māori community is. So the Māori roll, which I represent here, is not the Māori community because it's a lot larger than that. And a lot of those votes I funneled to particular people in this room. So it would be interesting. It would be interesting, right, from my point of view, and I think productive for the Māori community to reflect on if they have an issue with how we've ended up here now. That they can get some sort of data to come back to show them, well, this is kind of why. This is that there is a big Māori community, but you're not on the Māori roll. They may be happy with that. If not, but anyway.
Thank you for that constructive contribution. And I think the way to further that, because I think collectively as a community, we have a duty to have Maori better engaged in our governance processes, and in consultation with Councillor Pakipaki in framing some questions and understanding the specific issues around Maori participating would be a useful addition to the work of the poll. And I just want to note, I want to ensure that Councillor Pakipaki is consulted about the way that that is worded so that it helps the overall direction we're wanting to head. Councillor Brand.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Just on that note, would it be useful to feedback to central government about when people can change from being on a general to a Māori role? Because the timing of bringing in the Māori ward for this council election did not coincide with the ability for people to change from either being on the general role to the Māori role or vice versa. And I felt that feedback to central government about timings may help the situation of better voter turnout for a particular area that they've addressed.
Very familiar with that debate. It seems that in recent weeks there has been agreement reached across the Parliament because it does require a 75% majority for change. The concern that some have had about Māori having the right to be able to switch between roles at any time is you get a by-election that may occur either in a council or a by-election that occurs in a place like Hamilton West, and then political parties get organised to get a whole lot of people to switch just beforehand. It seems that that issue has been resolved, and so that change is likely to occur. I don't think it impacts on our decision to conduct the poll. Sorry? Sorry. Yeah, no. You know more about this than anybody, and we are in the debating mode, but I'm going to use my discretion.
No, not at all, but it has just recently gone back to the committee of the whole House, so the bill is in question and progressing really nicely.
And just to note, maybe we submitted on this issue as well.
We did submit on the issue, yes, supporting the proposed changes.
Okay, is there any further councillors that wish to debate it? Just exercising a right of reply. It is my view that on some issues, the submissions that you receive as a council through public processes are not necessarily representative of the broader community. And there sometimes is value in receiving these random polls. And the reason that I am very supportive of proceeding here is nothing is as important as the electoral system of which they get to choose who governs their community. On that note, we'll put the amended resolutions 1, 2 and 3 as one motion, moved by myself and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no, and carried. We now move to item 13, which is the annual report, which has been deferred until our next council meeting. The next item of business is item 16. Right. Correct. Or are we doing item, excuse me, apologies for the delay. The motion is that we move to item 16, which is the exclusion of the public. And the motion is that the council excludes the public from the following parts of the procedures with respect to the legal privileged issue associated with Mayor's report item and due to the issue of legal privilege. And the motion, we have the motion up on the board, please.
Excuse me.
To move it. Councillor Sanson.
Have we missed the next gen environmental data platform item? It's page 94.
Oh, that was my expectation. Sorry. I would prefer to proceed and do the items. I understand the IRIS Next Generation Environmental Plan, item 14, can be done in private or public.
Both in open.
Both in open session. I'd prefer to continue if the council is happy to continue to do the items that are in open session. Is kind of the flexibility on the agenda on that. Apologies, Max. We are going to continue with the items, and we're going to move to item 14, Iris Next Gen, shared environmental data platform. Invite, is it Sarah as well as yourself, Dennis?
Is this back?
Sorry.
This back.
You've got the learner in the chair, and getting the agenda sorted in the right order has bumped around a little, but we're on item 14 and would ask that the recommendation be received, explaining the increase in expenditure and handed over to our officials.
So I welcome any questions. So I welcome any questions. Would you like me to talk you through the solution, or do you want to take the report as read?
I think it would be helpful just to give an overview.
Yeah.
When I read the paper, I had to say I was not familiar with that much of what's in the system and what it's about. And so I think, given that we're looking at a significant unbudgeted expenditure, to get a bit of an overview of what the item was, why the unbudgeted expenditure has come about, would be very helpful.
Okay, so Nelson City Council really hasn't ever had a system to be able to manage the data related to its regional responsibilities. And what we've done over years is use the system that we've used for territorial data management and try to bend it to make it work. What's happened in recent years is that the requirements from the government for us to report, and also the requirements from our business to be able to meet their legislative requirements, really needs us to do better with the data that we collect for regional work. The regional councils, the true regional councils, have had a system to do that over years, because basically that's what they do. That system has come to the end of life, and they went out to market to look for a replacement, and they offered us the opportunity to be part of that. We would never be able to afford a system like this on our own. There's an opportunity for us to genuinely collaborate with the regional sector around the country and to take the benefits of their larger income base and skills to be able to join in this opportunity, which would then see us through to the future and us be able to meet our regional requirements and what we need to report up to government.
My question was, could you give us a bit more flavour of the sort of environmental data that is shared on this platform?
Sure.
Is it water quality? I know there'll be lots of it, but I'm just trying to
I'll let
find my way
Jo
and
talk
understand.
to that, because she's the business owner of this stuff, so she'll be able to tell you what sort of data would be collected.
Sure. Through the Mayor, kia ora koutou. So one of the benefits of this platform is that manages all environmental data. At the moment, we have consenting and compliance data being managed through the system that Jane was talking about. We have water quality and air quality data coming in through to limited systems, and then we don't have a really great reporting system for that can be integrated with other kinds of monitoring. And then we don't have a formal system really for managing spatial biodiversity and biosecurity type data. So this, one of the real benefits of this platform is that it's a spatially based platform. So you'll be able to look at monitoring, consenting, compliance, and shape files all together on a spatial platform. So you could look at it on a property basis. You can look at things that are happening within the area of a space, instead of the way that we currently do it, which is kind of individual files that don't necessarily speak to each other terribly well, and certainly not spatially.
Other questions? Councillor Stello.
Thank you, Nick. So just to clarify on that point, spatially it would do GIS type applications or equivalent?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct. It will.
Councillor Sanson.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Sorry, just pulling up my questions. So I sent through a question to the staff or officers and they answered. So I might just ask it and then maybe you can answer just for the benefit of everybody. So my question was really what kinds of software solutions are larger regions utilising? Canterbury, Wellington, Auckland, just because obviously it's critically important data. And I just wondered whether there was already something out there that they were using.
Through the mayor, those really big councils, they have in-house development teams and they have developed their own, what we call bespoke systems that they've got people in-house that can support and change as things change. We don't have the size of that. So the group of councils that are joined together are kind of the next level down. So it includes, Bay Plenty and Waikato, which are big councils, but not the big three.
Thanks. And just a further indication that I'm happy to move this whenever it's appropriate.
Thank you.
I'd like to. Thanks.
Other questions? Councillor Brand.
Thank you. Through the mayor. It's great that we've got some collaboration happening, so well done. I just want to know, do we know what the ongoing cost of maintenance of the system is? And secondly, do we need to factor that into our annual plan, long-term plan discussions that will be coming up to ensure that this stays relevant and useful going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Through the mayor, there's a table in the document that shows how much this will cost per year over the life of the application. So that includes all the support costs, and I've also popped in a decent contingency for, just in case we have some issues with our data. We will need to come to annual plan for the next year's money, which I've started, and we will need to pop this into the LTP as well.
Great, thank you. And my last question on that is hiccups with systems, because they happen. Are they providing a free help service or IT help desk thing to get this up and going to ensure those hiccups are addressed without additional cost?
Through the chair, there's an organisation called RACHL, which is a collaboration of the regional councils. They're the one undertaking the contract with Datacom, which is the provider, and they have negotiated a contract for break fix and those things that go on through the life of the application. We'll provide first level support, and then ongoing support will be through the contracted provider.
Can I just explain? The regional sector holding company is a device that some of the regional councils have created. They're council-controlled organisations, and there is actually, I think, going to be another debate at some stage as to whether we want to join that in some way. But it is a sense of the 14, 16 regional councils collaborating to try and leverage off each other to sort of economise and to introduce efficiencies into some of the systems. And as Jane has mentioned, in relation to this Generation 2 computer platform, that's one of the sort of operating models that has benefited from this collectivisation. And yet they've invited us in, and yet we realise that it's asking for some unbudgeted expenditure, but we wanted to get an indication from you today to say to the group that yes, we're in, and we'll build it into the annual planning round. It is a technology platform that will give us a greater ability to meet our reporting obligations, provide greater efficiencies for the work that we do. And the other thing that I've picked up since I've been here, yes, it will link in with our existing sort of GIS platforms. We will have to probably pay for something, I understand, to link in with our property evaluation system, which will continue to be run through our existing platform. But there are these things called APIs or something that computer programmers invent, and that allows the things to talk to each other. So we will be able to make it operational going forward.
And I have factored in that cost in the costings.
I've just had a Chief Executive Pat wish to contribute.
So I just want to draw your attention to paragraph 5.6, where we're paying 3% of the cost of this project. There's 10 councils involved. So that gives you an idea that we'll never get a deal as good as this. The regional sector work together very well, and they have a cost sharing structure where some of the bigger councils pick up 12%, and then it stages down, and us smaller unitary councils get 3%. So we get a real benefit from being part of the regional sector, and we'll never get a deal as good as this on our own. We just could not afford a system like this. And we are coming under more pressure from MFE to provide data in standard formats to them. And if we don't do this, then we will probably pick up costs over the next 2 or 3 years to start manually putting data into those sorts of formats. So it's come upon us as an opportunity, but it's one that's really too good to miss out on. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Executive. Councillor Courtney.
I'm happy to second if it hasn't been already.
We'll just continue to take questions, and then I'm going to call on you to move it when it comes to that point if you're happy, Councillor. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, we have a mover. You've still got an untidy chair. You will get me house trained between Pat and yourselves. It's being moved by Councillor Sanson. It's being seconded by Councillor Courtney. We're in question mode before we open the item up for debate. If members would like to ask further questions of our officials. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. Through the Mayor, just noting the chart with the 10-year cost of ownership, is there an expectation that this platform is going to be usable beyond that 10 years? And if so, could we anticipate that there would be some one-off costs to extend its lifespan?
Through the chair, so our plan is to depreciate the investment over the 10 years, though we do expect it to last longer. I suppose the only challenge that I guess I should bring to your attention is if there's a significant change in the local government space, then we may need to go back and make sure it's still doing what it was supposed to do. But we do anticipate that we will plan for its replacement at the end of its life cycle.
Any further questions? Councillor Skinner, questions?
Well, thank you for this. I was looking at this. So this is not a platform that exists as such. It's a platform that will need to be developed. We're investing in a development of a platform, and I see that will take 18 months and then possibly another 3 years.
Yeah, sorry, through the chair. There is a pilot council that's going to go first. So we've positioned ourselves sort of in the early end, but not long enough that we miss out on the opportunity. So another council will do the testing for us.
So I see obviously there's an investment in there, and it's putting our hand in for this project, which is in a development, but we are being reliant on it being successful in achieving what we require. And obviously the ups are bespoke. One would do it well because we could develop how we need. This is something which doesn't exist yet, but needs to be developed. And we need to show that we're prepared to put that money forward, and then 5 years down the track, we'll have something to use.
Yeah, 24-25 we'll start work, and we will be using it in the annual year 25.
So and through the chair, when I saw Iris, that I almost read INSIS in regards to the police one database. I started friendly for is this a parallel, and that had great things and had to be developed, and then 9 years later they threw it out at a great cost because what they're trying to achieve is always very difficult to link a whole lot of databases and for it to be all to everyone.
Yeah, through the chair, I think we've all learned a whole heap from that, from NovaPay.
Yep.
And my view is a very careful approach has been taken, and a very firm contract has been negotiated with Datacom to protect us.
And through the lead of the chair, one last to put my mind at ease, so I can move away from INSIS to Iris, is that you think it is possible to develop something for all these 16 councils, but still be tailored for our needs.
So the plan is not to tailor it. The plan is to have a consistent approach across regional councils so that people in our community have a consistent experience. So it will be learning from each other and having a consistent approach across the country.
Thank you. Questions asked as well. Thank you.
Councillor Pakipaki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is about familiarity with large software projects like this here. From what I read, in particular to 510 and with regard to risk, the capital being front-ended like it is, that capital expenditure in that 18 months, without having a calculator in front of me, adds up to really what the majority of that. Is there anything, if throughout the project, any cost recoveries that we potentially could have with project of, say, in, where are we, 28, 29?
Okay, so through the chair, so that amount that I've said that we would basically lose if we pulled out, so we have to give 18 months notice if we pull out, and we have to do that at 18 months on. And the thought I was having there was, say there was a significant change to local government, what we would lose if we pulled out. So that money that we would write off as a loss would then go to the rest of the councils in the sector for their ongoing use of it, because unless, you know, they will carry on. But there is also mechanisms with the whole wide contract that we can stop at any stage, and that there is provision in those contracts for us to get repayment if the company doesn't provide us with the service that we expect.
Dennis Bushcan.
While this is, I guess, being presented as an additional cost, it'll be an overhead cost. The business units that will be using this data, using these platforms, do have some cost recovery mechanisms. For instance, Joe's team, we do have some annual charges on consent holders in terms of the monitoring and supervision of consent that we do have. And likewise, Mandy, in terms of the consent processing and some of our compliance opportunities, there is income that comes in that helps go toward meet the overhead costs going forward.
Any further questions for our officials? I thank them very much. The resolution has been moved and seconded and is now open to debate. My perspective on this is a really important piece of work. We spend as a society about 10 times as much monitoring money as we do the natural environment. And actually, if we're going to lift our game, you manage what you measure. We need to measure it better. And so that's the first principle on which I think this is the right direction. The second is that with respect to any prospects of mergers, I set out quite clearly in my inaugural speech the view that we need to be aligning our systems as much as possible with neighbours and others to get sensible economies of scale. And I also think it's incredibly useful when we're judging the performance of our council around environment, that if we're using the same systems as other councils, we've also got the capacity to be able to line them up and say we're doing better or worse in particular areas. And I see that as a benefit. There was a comment of concern, well, what happens to local government reform if we invest in this IT platform over 10 years? How might it be consistent with that? I have quite the opposite view, and that is actually, I think the prospect of reform makes it even more important that you align your systems, because it's going to be easier then for them to come together in the event there is some form of local merger. I would note, if there's any projects that give me the willies, it is IT projects. They do have greater risk, and we just need to rely on our management to ensure that they are giving it the level of oversight across the local authorities that are investing it to make sure it stays on track. And the challenge for management is to make sure if it is going off track, that we're told early. Where IT projects have historically in central government caused huge blowouts is where officials have not been open with their governors that it's going to custard, and they've continued to pour 3, 4, 5 years of money into it without actually getting to a point of saying, actually, this ain't working and we're better to pull the plug sooner rather than later. And that will be the guidance I'd give to officials on going forward. So I support the resolution. Other contributions? That being the case, I shall put it. All those in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Contrary, no. That is carried. And can I thank the officials for the good work on it? We now come to item number 15, which is the annual report of Uniquely Nelson. And I'd like to invite Chris Butler, the chair, and Simon Duffy before the committee. A number of us were privileged to come along to your AGM, of which was both useful in respect of your guest speaker, who I think gave a really good oversight of the national challenges that's facing the sectors of which you do hard work for. And the second comment I wish to make is that I think we all appreciate how tough a time the retail and hospitality sector is having, and with skill shortages, floods, and everything else, as it's been a challenging time for Uniquely Nelson. So good to have you before us and look forward to you presenting your report.
Thank you very much, Mayor Smith. For those who are familiar faces around here, I'm the manager of Uniquely Nelson. Chris Butler is the chairman of our board. We're an incorporated society. We're based in Harding Street. We're a board of 8 people made up of retailers, hospitality, commercials, accounts, marketing, so forth. So it's a good board. So we used to do a year-to-year contract. We now have a three-year contract in place with Nelson City Council, produce a report each year. Uniquely Nelson has grown quite substantially in the last 3 to 4 years, mainly for the use of technology and the different platforms we have, and how we've grown our consumer database and our business database. So I put the report in front of you as far as the achievements and what our objectives and our actions have been, almost to such an extent that I wouldn't mind saying that we've kind of outgrown the contract and some of the deliveries of what we're doing. Which will be up for discussion fairly soon, early next year. So there's any part of the report that anybody has any questions on? Bear in mind that we are a marketing organisation with 900 businesses on our books. 2/3 of those are active. The 1/3 are more your doctors, your dentists, people around the outside in Collingwood Street and so forth. Our main responsibility is to retail and hospitality and supporting the events that come to Nelson City. Those events that the community has put on, or events that have come down, such as cricket or netball or the All Blacks and so forth. So, and the 50% of our job is marketing. The other 50% is behind the scenes. The council gives us information to supply to our members, and we supply that informational feedback back to the respective officers or to the respective departments. So that's kind of behind the scenes, and there's quite a bit of that goes on. So the working relationship that we have with our members works quite well. So we're basically the meet in the middle, which makes it interesting. Is there any part of the report?
Was there any comments that Chair Chris that you wish to make in giving the overview of presenting the annual report?
No, just in general, just want to thank the Uniquely Nelson team for another challenging year. Also, Nikki McDonald and her team, the council, for an ever improving relationship. So I think that certainly over the last few years, some of the familiar councillors here will know that communication between the two organisations has become a lot stronger. And also our advocacy with the local community has become a lot stronger as well, so more open and transparent. So that's been an improvement. Obviously, it's been a really tough time. People are coming back to some sort of normality, but it's slow progress. And obviously, there's a lot of reserves being tapped into. And also still staff shortages, and also sickness, COVID still around, etc. But all reports are that campsites are full, bookings are full coming into summer, so we're really hoping that momentum will then go into next year, which we hope isn't going to be what everyone's predicting, where it's going to be a very tough year, that we can look at trying to put Nelson on the map as being a destination, Nelson City.
Did our Group Manager Strategy want to add any comments to the presentation of the annual report from Uniquely Nelson?
Through the chair, I just think that I would say that the annual report really shows the hard work that the team has done, both the board and Simon and his team, and everything they've achieved through a lot of promotions and events, and also some really good partnerships. And I think we're getting very good value for the investment we make. Thank you.
Can I begin the questioning? And that is, do we, and excuse me, coming as a newbie, do we have data on the actual retail sales figures? And if so, on what frequency for Nelson City to get a feel for what's going on in the retail market? And do we actually collect any data on vacant retail space? You know, often you'll hear the comment from the public, oh, I'm worried there's a whole lot of retail shops in Nelson that look empty, look like those guys are doing pretty tough. So what data, and it may go beyond the bounds of Uniquely Nelson and to yourself as strategy manager, does someone collect that data to provide us an ongoing accurate pic of what's going on in the commercial activities in the city?
Ms. Smith, there was was produced by a company in Wellington and BNZ Bank called the Market View Report, and that came out every quarter, and it was an excellent report, had lots of information there, compared us to Richmond as far as sales figures, transactions, EPOS transactions. A few things changed within BNZ, and that report stopped coming through. And Nikki and I had been a few months ago looking at revising that, and that is work in progress, as I believe, of getting that data, not just for us, but for the council. And it was a fairly substantial report. So I believe that sooner or later we'll be coming back. So up to when we used to get the report, there's lots of information there. We used to share it with our members. We shared amongst the council. So that's work in progress of actually having that coming back.
And data on vacant buildings?
I'll just update on the market view and then hand back to Simon around the vacant buildings, but we have been negotiating with the provider of the data to reconstitute the report after they lost a lot of their source information. And I'm hoping that at the next Uniquely Nelson board meeting that we will have that information again.
Regarding... So you have a question on the data?
No, sorry. I was just signaling to Councillor Sansom that she's next.
Okay. Regarding the 4 leases or commercial properties around Nelson City, it was interesting when we went into COVID, how many leases were in the city, and we've come out of COVID in the last, when I say come out of COVID, after a year and a half, we're actually in a better position than what we were before we went into that. So it's been quite interesting. There are 4 leases in town. What was predicted when we first 6 months we went into COVID, we thought this is all doom and gloom. I think Nelson City's punched above its weight. There's 2 more coffee shops opened in the last 2 weeks, so we've got more coffee shops. I think the CBD, and considering what our businesses have done it tough, there's a lot of fiscal debt out there with our businesses, and the hospitality is struggling, not so much through lack of people, but lack of staff. Some of I've had people from retailers to people passing through, nothing's open on a Sunday, Monday or Tuesday. Ones that are open are doing very well. So as far as 4 leases, I think we're in a pretty good position. We are in contact with the likes of Colliers, Bailey's, and the people in that commercial space on a regular basis. We get approached looking for space. I pass it on to Jill Lyon and Jeff Faulkner or Bevan Dixon, and they come to us and ask what we think. So there's a lot of communication in that space, because that is an important space for the city, is to have those shop fronts full above all.
Thank you for both those answers, and I'm certainly interested in trying to get a good feel of robust data as to how well we're doing, rather than just basing it on individual opinions. I'm going to come to Councillor Sansom for questions.
Thanks so much. So just on the data, Infometrics does that kind of quarterly reporting, and I think that they maybe already provide that to NRDA and the Chamber of Commerce. It covers GDP, consumer spending, population traffic flows, property market shifts, industry trends, labour market dynamics, living standards, and I'm sure that they, I actually ask for that from time to time from NRDA, so I'm sure that that's something they're probably comfortable to share.
Through the chair, just to say that report, yes, is very useful, and we share relevant parts of that with Uniquely Nelson, but the market view data was on a different level altogether in terms of retail spend.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner was next.
I think I'll just say happy to move. I take and read a very well put report. I'm happy to move and happy to speak to.
You have any questions? We have a mover from...
I'm happy to second.
and seconded by Councillor Brown, but I have a further Brand. My apologies. We have a further question from Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks, Simon and Chris. A great report, and thanks for all your hard work. And I know it's been tricky times. Nelson, the smart little city. Is it time to review that from your perspective? Are you happy with it? You guys have to get out there and use it all the time, and be just interested to know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I've some of the retailers saying, we're a smart little city, what's smart about us? I have in the last couple of years that we have stopped doing a lot of this and actually doing quite a bit of this. Through that adversity, I think the CBD and we've increased our membership. That's quite interesting. Ourselves, we're doing less and less in print and radio and more on the keyboard. That nelsonadvantage.co.nz that goes out every week has been a huge tipping point for our members. It's regular, it's updated, and it's well read. Our open rate on that is huge. The smart little city, I think there's a lot to add to that. You can talk it, but I think we need to walk it. What's interesting, what's smart about us, whether it be commerce, events, our community, how we talk to each other. I'd just like to say that, and I want to be quite open here, that there has been us and them, as in the business community and NCC, and that's just being open and honest. I think if we work collectively through that strength, we will have unity as a community that we live in, and also the business community that we are all responsible for. It's a two-way street. So I think there's work to be done there. We look forward to the City Engagement Forum. Yourself, Rohan, Tim. There's one more. Nick. We look forward to that. And when we read what's coming, that discussion, the idea of bringing some of our business leaders, I should say, people who have got some skin in the game, either commercially, hospitality, retail, to actually be part of that. And that's something we look forward to, and front foot forward.
Hard to be and push a little harder, and your comments are welcome on that. And there was a strong level of commitment from this council to work hard on those relationships.
Yeah,
I am interested in teasing out, and it was a tough question from Councillor Rainey, and that is does Uniquely Nelson, and you may want to go away and consider it. I'm interested in the answer, and it is a big question. Is the smart little city brand cutting the mustard, or is it a time to rethink? And I don't necessarily expect either yourself or the chair to answer it. It's a big strategic question that Councillor Rainey has asked. And I don't think it's necessarily something you want to make a quick decision on, because if you're going to change such branding, there's marketing, there's costs and those things, and we need to test those things. But I'd welcome either further thoughts, or if you'd like to go away as an organisation and come back to council with a more considered answer to what is a big question.
I'd just like to add, I mean, I don't have the answer to smart little city, apart from the fact that you got to back up what you preach from a marketing perspective. So if we're going to be the smart little city, what is it that we're putting in place that makes it smart to people outside in other regions? The other thing is that, as Simon talks about, we've got to work collectively better to market Nelson City. So one of the tasks the last mayor, the final word from our last mayor was, right, it's time to get on and work more closely with our partners, NRDA and Nelson City Council, to work out a strategy of how we encourage people into Nelson City as the wider Nelson Tasman strategy. And we've just developed a new brand, and we want to put it out there, and we want to develop some strategies of messaging into the likes of Wellington, Christchurch and others. So that does then bring up the question is, what do we say about Nelson? And obviously from our point of view, our brand name at the moment is Uniquely Nelson. And when you drill down into that, it's what's unique about what we have to offer. So that's some of the work that we want to be doing. Does that message fall into smart? Does the NRDA's message to the wider public fall into smart, or is just smart a term that's for internal use about the way that we operate? So I guess it's depending on where you want that term to be in your internal papers, Or do you want that to be your marketing message to the outside world, not only for tourism, but for commercialisation and investment? So I think, yes, it needs a review, and I think that we need some strategies around putting Nelson City more on the map.
Thank you. Other questions from councillors with the report? Councillor Courtney, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and welcome to both of you, and thank you so much. I'm going to echo what Councillor Rainey has said, the excellent job you're doing. Thank you for that. It's very much appreciated. I really want to hear from you about the partnerships that we challenged you to sort of go out and establish and be more inclusive in the community by forming these partnerships. What are the most recent? I'm aware of the NMIT, I'm aware of that, but is there anything more recent that you are proud of that you can tell us about?
Yeah, we have a little side business that Yiki Nelson, which is the virtual reality, if you want to call it a side business. We have virtual reality, for those who don't know, have a look at our website. It's got VR written all over. We've VR partnering with the council with the conference, wedding facilities. We've VR'd the whole of Saxon Field. NMIT was our biggest one. Took us so whether it's sports, hospitality, retail, entertainment or conference facilities, and that does generate a bit of it generate extra revenue. And those are partnerships that we actually never had before. It was pretty much the hospitality and the retail sector. The partnership we have, as a good example, would be we've formed one with Noel Leeming. So we get a rebate from that, and that generates about $35,000 a year. And it goes straight back into our members in our city. It's a card that we give to all our members, and they get cost plus 15%. We do a friends and family campaign. We do $700,000 in sales and get a 2% rebate on that. And that happens twice a year, and there's those things ongoing. So it's those sorts of relationships, the relationships we form with the airport, working with NRDA, which tourism's not in our mandate as such, but if they're tourism and they fly in, and that's our biggest port, they're going to be coming to town. We work with NRDA probably daily, if not every second day, either with different staff, and that's a good, strong relationship. We would like to at a more board-to-board level, have a better understanding of that, and that's work in progress. So relationships, people say, what do you do for a living? And I go, networking, relationship building. And then we have membership and publications. We're very much digital. And just on the Smart Little City, if I could just finish off on that, we have an initiative for as we head into autumn. We did a competition a year ago, and we built a database outside of Nelson. And a few staff within the building here, with Simon focusing on Trafalgar Street, why would you build a database from Kate Ranga down to Bluff? And I kind of thought, how do you answer that one? I thought, with so many bananas in Nelson, there's whole plantations out there to pick from in the e-commerce space. We're 35 boutique businesses with Shopify or e-commerce platforms. So we're looking at initiatives we head into autumn. I've taken Nelson out of Nelson to bring people to Nelson and building a boutique mall online on our website. Sitting alongside that, when we pump it out to that large nationwide database, is the lights working, and we spoke to NRDA. Sitting alongside that is the tourism offer. So that's work in progress, and that's a huge leap forward for us. Once again, more on the keyboard and less in print and radio. That comes down to budget.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions that councillors have of Uniquely Nelson on their annual report? Again, on behalf of council, thank you for both of your efforts. We look forward to your engagement with the new task force that's been established. I think it is worth having a further think about the Smart Little City and whether that's the right way forward. And I think your comments that anything we do in that space needs to be strongly linked with the Nelson Regional Development Agency and what goes on and the other partners if there was to be any rethink in that space. I would now like to put the resolution that has been moved and seconded by Councillor Skinner and Councillor Brand on the annual report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Thank you very much. Given that we're only 5 minutes from 2:01 and our remaining items, as I understand it, are all in confidential business, I think the most efficient way to progress business is to start the lunch break now, resume at 1:25 and deal with all of the items in confidential business at that time.
I'm happy to move that. I'm happy to move that we go into confidential, if that's what you'd like.
Between the deputy mayor singing the same tune as the governance staff, I'll just be the obedient servant, do what I'm told. And that is that we will deal with the motion into the exclusion of public business. Tim has very helpfully moved the motion. There's a seconder from Councillor Courtney. Is there anybody that wishes to debate the need to go into public exclusion? There's not. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary carried. And we are adjourned till 1:25.